All right, we are back in open session. It is, again, it's the Wednesday, January 15th Board of Education meeting. We are reconvening out of closed session. So next up is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next up, I'm going to make a little switch on the agenda. I'm going to have comments and suggestions from the public before the board recognitions and presentations. Does anybody in the audience wish to address the board tonight? Mrs. Bullen, anybody? Okay. If not, we can move on to the board recognition of the multilingual newcomer and dual language curriculum update.
All right, good evening. So tonight we have some members of our instruction department here to share some details with you about our dual language and our newcomer curriculum. So as we all know, Dr. Perdomo is our executive director of multilingual programming. However, multilingual programming does not sit in isolation from the rest of our content area. So all of the work that we do around curriculum, we work in partnership, we work together to ensure that we have a consistent plan for all students in our district. So they're going to kick us off tonight and share some details with you.
Oh, I drive. Good evening. So before we get started, I want to preface that we do have some teachers in the audience that are newcomers in dual language and ESL, so that if you did have any questions and you wanted to hear from their perspective, I'm sure they're more than happy to speak as well. So they are here in the audience and we want to just welcome them. So as Ms. Savage said, I'm the Executive Director, Joshua Perdomo. We're going to start with just our newcomer programming and discuss what is the definition, the legal definition of a newcomer in our district, or not in our district, but as a state, so that we just have that common understanding. So it's a federal regulations define it as a student who is a foreign-born student. So and they have to be in the ages of 3 to 21. And then attending one of our public schools within our district for 3 academic years. Then they're considered newcomers and they're considered to be eligible to receive newcomer status. So parents, when they do come in, just like we do with our screening processes, parents are informed that they have those newcomer supports available to them. And then parents can make the decision whether they want them to be enrolled in a newcomer program, which is what we have at the junior high, which we'll explain, or if they would like them to be in ESL, or if they don't want any services at all, or dual language, or no services at all. So they have that additional layer of options as well for them. Okay, you're gonna have to do this. I think I'll just do that. So the newcomer curriculum, we're gonna start with elementary and the structure. So we have a curricular resource that was adopted in 2022, which is Vista Higher Learning. So Vista Higher Learning is a language curricular resource. So it really helps our students with the functional language to best start to acclimate them to just understanding how to function within a school system and really building those basic foundations of English. We then also adopted in July of 2024, the Read 180, the code. What we noticed within Vista is that even though it was a great program to support students with a functional language, what we found that it was missing and we needed to fill in the gap is for our students who are in grades 3, 4, and 5, when they were missing some of those early foundational skills and they weren't receiving that within their core, Vista was not necessarily the best platform to provide those foundational skills of literacy, of learning to read. Vista was very much of how to use and learn English for the functional use of speaking, not necessarily for the literacy of learning to read. So that's why we combine that with the code to really give our students a maximum and to maximize the approach in what we're supporting them with, not only how to speak English and utilize the English language, but also being able to build literacy and those reading skills for our students who are not necessarily getting that within the core in 3, 4, 5, or need those, I shouldn't say you're not getting it in the core, but need those gaps filled because of where they're coming in their age and their academic journey. Our program structure at the elementary level, though, you got to go back.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the other way. Yeah.
Which way?
This way. Yeah.
This way? I did that too. I'm so sorry. I went so far.
This is Mrs. Fleming, coordinator of science. It's okay.
Yeah, that's why I never do that.
help me one time.
You were talking about directions earlier. So our program structure at the elementary level, sorry for that, is at our elementary level, all of our students are seen in a small group setting by an ESL certified teacher. So they are pulled during small group instructional time. So in our elementary settings, there's a dedicated time of small group where students receive a variety of different opportunities for instruction. And this is the time that we try to target our ESL students who have requested to receive services. We do that so that they are in the classroom and able to receive whole group instruction and core instruction with their peers so that they're not missing out on new material, new criteria, new skills. And then when the ESL teacher then pulls them, then they're supporting what's happening within the classroom, but also ensuring that they're making some of those linguistic transfers, supporting them with vocabulary. They might be preloading some information for them to really try to blend the two worlds together, but in a smaller group setting to really target that instruction for our students. And we say approximately 30 minutes a day because it does depend on their linguistic level. Students who have a lower linguistic level, like a 1.0 to 1.9, might be seen more throughout the week than a student who has a 4.0. They may not need those services as much. So we want to make sure that they're in their classroom as much as possible, but also giving them their supports that they're legally entitled to and required from the district.
Really quickly, a small group. How big is a small group typically?
Yeah, so it varies by school, and it's based on the amount of students that they have within a grade. So we try to keep it between 8 to 10 students is what we really try to look at. But our schools even do better than that sometimes, and they try to look at students based on their linguistic levels. So, we may have, for example, school has about 15 students that are in third grade, but 5 of those students are newcomers. They might see them in a group because their needs are going to be a little bit different than a third grader who has been with us since kindergarten, and then they'll be seen separately. So it might be a group of 10 and then a group of 5, but we try to keep it within that 8 to 10 range for the ESL elementary level. So we talked a little bit about the VISTA curriculum in the background. So it is grade level scope and sequence of standards. It's scaffolded content to build that background knowledge and academic vocabulary. And there's a lot of language acquisition strategies that are built in to really support, again, that linguistic support. Andrea Cohn is our multilingual program facilitator, and she supports our ESL elementary level. So her and that team have really worked well in now taking the VISTA curriculum and coupling it with what our ELA standards are and finding those connections and really blending the two worlds together so that they're not standalone. It's not a standalone curriculum on its own. It is aligned to standards and it is aligned to that, but we want to make sure that, again, that there is some commonality and blending between what our students are learning and then what they're getting in the ESL, at their ESL time as well. And teachers did have a voice in the use of this product and being able to, which is the reason for the adoption. So in our junior high programming model, it is a sheltered class approach. So unlike the ESL at the elementary, where students are pulled for small group instructional time, so they're in a general classroom setting with their peers, and then they're pulled in small group. At the junior high level, we don't have that small group pull-out model. We have it integrated within their class. It is a sheltered approach. So for our newcomer students, they would receive a sheltered ELA class using the VISTA curriculum to build those foundational skills of language. And then they also use the Read 180, which we'll talk about as well. They're in a sheltered math class for newcomers. And we'll get specifics into what that looks like. Same thing with content. And then this year, we also had the privilege of partnering with the Elk Grove Township, which we do have Ms. Renee from the township behind us here. And with her work, she was able to bring in individuals from the township, and they were able to collaborate with our newcomers and really building those opportunities for SEL. We saw that as a feedback from our teachers that was a piece that we were missing within our curricular atmosphere, and how to just create that community and relationships within our students and just having them feel safe and secure in our schools. So we were happy to do that partnership with them, and we're continuing to look to do that partnership for the spring as well for the rest of the school year. So here we're going to get into, so what does this sheltered curriculum look like for our students? So as I discussed with ELA, for our newcomer students, when they are in sheltered classroom for ELA, for newcomers, they are not using the core curricular resource of StudySync as every other junior high student would. They're using Vista to build that functional language and Read 180. Now, when I say newcomer, they have the option of there's the opportunity of them being in this classroom for anywhere between 1 to 3 years, but we have points where teachers are advocating for when it's time for students to be moved into the core. Again, our goal is never to withhold a student from accessing grade level curriculum and content, but we want to make sure that when they get there, they're going to be successful and have the tools ready to be able to do that. So there is no time frame where a student has to be in it for a full year. It may be 6 months. It's really fluid because language is fluid. So as students start to acquire and assimilate and just really break out of their shells, then we want to push them forward in doing that. And our newcomer teachers are phenomenal in advocating for that opportunity for our students to transition into that core level class with StudySync. And then I will turn it over to Michelle to talk about math.
Hello, good evening. My name is Michelle Benages, and I'm the district math coordinator. I have the pleasure of collaborating with our multilingual program team and my junior high math coach team to adapt our core curriculum, which is illustrative math, that we've had adapted since 2021. Together, we're able to take the curriculum and modify it in a way that our students are able to best access it without language being that barrier for our 6-8 newcomers for the math ESL course. So part of that is to prioritize the essential lessons that are based upon our Common Core grade level standards that are major work, really aligned to that algebra readiness. We also identify the key math academic vocabulary that align to our language development standards for each unit of study. And then part of our work is also to modify the embedded unit assessments that focus on those standards and incorporate language supports to help students best access that math curriculum. I'll turn it over to Ann now to talk about the content.
Good evening. I'm Ann Fleming. I am the Science and Social Science Facilitator. We ran a similar process to math. Myself, along with Edie, who is our multilingual facilitator, and the teachers took the core resources of STEM Scopes for Science and the HMH Social Studies and prioritized the lessons based on priority standards. And for social studies, we have that additional layer of Illinois mandates. So we started there, took a look at those, and then we made a skeleton, a scope and sequence. What we did decide to do, though, is not have both contents running simultaneously because the academic language was an awful lot for our brand newcomers to handle. So we do alternate science and social science each quarter. So in any given year, they would have 2 units of each. The assessments are also modified in order to not test the language, but to test the knowledge that they have so that we can truly remove that barrier of language in order to see if they've gained that knowledge toward their standard. We have a high emphasis on the academic vocabulary along with additional tier 2 and tier 1 vocabulary to help reinforce and them to build up those conversational skills as well.
I have a question just on the math. Are you finding that any of our newcomers in junior high are advanced in math, maybe from the country they come from? And if so, are there pretty quick opportunities for advancement?
So I will say that in talking to the principals and the teachers in the schools, that is the one content where we do our students really shifting quickly.
Kind of universal,
yes.
Right.
So once we start to remove that language, it's a catch-22 because within math, there's a lot of literacy now embedded within it. But once we start to remove those barriers of that literacy and really getting down to the skill, we're seeing that a lot of our students are able to transition quicker from a sheltered class. And that's usually one of the first classes that they transition into a core setting so that they can have that support. I think the great piece, though, is that, as Michelle was stating, is that from the beginning, we start with the core instruction, and it's modified because of the universal language of numbers. We really want to make sure that they're still getting that access to it. And then, as Michelle would say, it's with math, it's such grade levels specificity and making sure that they're getting those skills at each of those grade levels, because then they end up spiraling up to where they build on each other. So being able to get that. So We do see that, not for everyone, but it's definitely one of the first contents that we do see students transition into quicker.
Thank you.
And so they can transition subject by subject, essentially, right?
Yeah, so again, so that's what we try to do, are very fluid. Now, easier said than done, right? There's a lot of implications. So we know that this year, our scheduling for junior high they did the best that they could, but it was a little bit complicated in the sense that there was a lot of overlap between grade levels. So that did cause some hiccups in that process at some times. But I think schools were very, very creative in trying to problem solve those individually to make that happen. Next year, though, we're shifting to a new middle school models, the schedule. This will not be an issue because now there isn't that overlap. So then students will be able to transition much smoother, and that will be less of a barrier to occur. So we're excited for that because it allows for more opportunities for our students. The other piece that we wanted to talk about is just staffing allocations. One of the things that we looked at when I started in the district is really looking at our shifts need basing for staffing. So I was working very closely, with Ross and his team for HR, and then also with Susan, and really building this awareness that one ESL teacher for every single school is not may not be appropriate. When we have to look at students based on their linguistic level. So if we have a school with 30 students, but they're all in the 1.0 range, which is very low English proficiency, their needs are very different than a school who has 30 students, but they're living in the 3.5 to 4.6 range. So the linguistic level, the complexity of the student, the amount of service minutes that they need, because there are legal requirements in minutes based on their level of language proficiency. That also that's also another piece to look at when we talk about how many staff members should be at a building to support, and what is responsible in making sure that we're giving our students the best that we need. At the junior high level, we had the privilege of I sought out an Elevating Educators grant. So this was a grant that we were awarded where we got to partner with a university. In this case, we did it with Harper, where we were able to give our ELA junior high teachers the opportunity to go back and get their ESL endorsement at no cost to them. And this was the incentive of ensuring that our schools had more ESL certified teachers to ensure that our students were receiving those services from teachers with that certification. So we were eligible to do that. It was something that the state had provided for us. So of course, I applied and we were awarded that. So it was a fantastic opportunity for our teachers. And I know Susan knows the exact number, but I believe it was 13 staff members total that went through this.
Yep. So it was teachers and a couple of administrators, including Dr. Robinson, who did it as well. So, and Elizabeth Degree did it as well. So we had a little group of admin and teachers, so 13 total.
Is this ongoing or is this a one-time grant?
The grant ran for the grant ran for a couple of years, and so now we no longer have that grant. And so we went through that process. We purposefully identified our junior high ELA because that is what the state guidelines and expectations say, that we should be using that group and that content area to provide those minutes in English as a second language. And we didn't have nearly enough. So we wanted to really boost that up to get us back to a place where we could actually do our spectrum of services for ESL appropriately. So now we're in a much better position, including the FTE, which will, that we have added in the last few years. If you go back, you'll see a lot of ESL has been added in the last few years. So as needs arise, we're always looking at ways that we can support that.
Yeah, and that goes to that point of that restructuring of the ESL staffing. I talked about a little bit within the elementary world and even in our junior high world. But just to kind of put it in perspective, Brentwood at the time when we were looking at this and the restructuring, Brentwood was now they're servicing about 150 some students, about 152, I think, total. At the time that we were looking at this, they had 97 students with one teacher, as compared to a school like Salt Creek, who only had 27 students with one teacher. And now we know that Brentwood, Devonshire, and Forest View have the highest number of newcomer students. Actually, Forest View and Devonshire have the highest numbers of. So we had to increase our FTE there because of the needs of our students. So now, Forest View, when they're sitting at 90 plus students, and a third, if not more, are newcomer students to our district, that changes the FTE allocation that we wanted for them to be able to support with those students. And not only is it FTE or ESL certified, but it's also strategically looking for teachers and staff that have the languages of the students that we're servicing. Because remember, we do have that rule of 20 or more in a school. We have to do our due diligence in trying to hire staff with those language needs. So at Forest View, they meet that threshold of 20 in Ukrainian and Russian. At Devonshire, they meet that with Polish. And very close to Russian, and then Brentwood, it's Spanish and Polish. So ensuring that we have those linguistic needs across the district. And then for this current school year, we also looked at adding dual language resource staff. So we talked about the need within our dual language programming of having bilingual interventionists. We've had the discussion in the past that our ESPs, while they did a fantastic job in supporting our students with giving them the interventions, we also felt the need that it was important to have a certified teacher being the ones providing that intervention to our students. So we did look at having bilingual interventionists added as a district. And then we also looked at newcomer support. So not only were we having newcomer students coming into the district, but there were also newcomers coming into dual language, which was also new for our dual language teachers because they're coming in and yes, they may have the Spanish language, but they don't necessarily have the academic capacity at those grade levels. So I'll put it in perspective. John Jay this year alone had 33 students that are newcomers. 27 of them went into the dual language program in grades 3, 4, 5. So when they come in dual language, their gaps in those foundational skills of literacy, of reading and English were not there. So therefore we created these newcomer support positions so that they can support them with their English pathway and giving them the tools to be successful. And those key years of literacy in K-1-2, they didn't have the opportunity to have that here in 59. So now we're making sure that they get those opportunities through those additional supports and layers.
So for bilingual interventionists, are they specifically ELA, SLA, or do they include math interventions as well in other languages?
So it is primarily an ELA and SLA, but I don't know if we have any bilingual math.
We actually really focus on because we have limited Spanish speaking staff, so we want to ensure that when we are providing when we're providing those positions for interventionists, we're leveraging the language in Spanish with its SLA or ELA.
Mm-hmm.
So with math, it'd be nice, but we really want to make sure that they're getting that in the languages. And so as we heard, math is a little more universal. So we really focus on that.
So how many bilingual interventionists do we have?
So in our district, so this year, the exact number, I think it's about 7, if I'm correct, within the district. And I think this year we had the 7, including the 3, I believe we added this year to support us. And then that's outside of the newcomer support. So then we added 3 newcomer support positions. And those strategically went to Rupley, John Jay, and Frost. Yes, I apologize.
Does John Jay have a newcomer ESL teacher?
So all schools have a ESL teacher, not specifically designated to newcomer, but they do have that newcomer support position that was hired this year because of the newcomer trends that were going into dual language there. So they have that position. Frost has that position because we saw that newcomer again within the dual language program there, and then with Rupley as well. So we strategically chose those buildings because of our newcomers that were entering were going into the dual language programming, and it was taxing the amount of then our ESL teachers that were the additional supports that they needed to provide.
Have we considered, because there's so many newcomers, have we considered having classroom, like all-day classroom support, ESL coaches, something like that in our schools that might need it?
Yeah, so we are having ongoing conversations of how do we continue to advance and strengthen our newcomer programming at the elementary and at the junior high. We had conversations just yesterday with our junior high admin and some restructuring for next year for our newcomer programming and seeing how we can continue to enhance that piece. I think the hard part and the tricky part with that is that we can never determine the amount of newcomers that we're going to have. Now, the trend has been for the last 3 years. We don't know if that trend will continue for the years to come. So when I say it's difficult in that nature, there's pockets within there, and for the schools that do need it, we would be looking at more of a multi-grade approach versus a single grade subject, because for a lot of the buildings, it's not a clear, there might be only 5 in first grade and only 7 in second grade. So to collectively, we would look at maybe a multi-grade. We have had those conversations, but nothing concrete or nothing that we're ready to say this is where we feel comfortable moving forward with yet. What we're really focusing on and trying to ensure that we're doing is also providing our teachers and providing that professional development to all teachers to really ensure how to support our students linguistically and really building that culture that we're all teachers of language. Because to our point that we've talked about, newcomer supports, ESL supports, all of these supports are by choice. And if parents don't want to receive these supports, we want to make sure that our teachers are equipped to still support them within their classrooms. And we don't want to rely on that they would always be placed in a newcomer setting, because not all families would want that.
For newcomer support personnel, are those like push-in interventionists who are used when needed in specific classrooms?
Yeah, so for these newcomer support positions, the specific ones that like John J. Frost and at Rupley, those are push in and pull out. Mostly it is a pull out model because we want to give that direct, intense instruction in those foundational skills of literacy. So we really want to make sure that they're being reinforced. Now, our teachers, based on their schedules and their caseload, because it is different at each building, they do have opportunities to do some push in and support the students within their classroom during whole group instruction as well, just to provide that extra layer of support. But we do want to make sure that they have that opportunity in that small group instruction that is directly to what they need in that moment in time. So we do use the code Read 180, which puts all of our students in a placement. And it gets them into their level of language and where they're at in their linguistic path, as well as where they're at in their literacy journey, and ensuring that they're getting that instruction and they're going through a path that's individualized to them. So it's not just putting them on a computer program, but it's utilizing the platform to support and I get baseline data of where they're at, but then also using those skills then to teach them directly where they're at and giving them those skills to be successful.
Will you be discussing materials at all that you use for the newcomers, actually, because I see you're going to dual language now. I just wanted to ask, my understanding is there's translating materials that are being used in junior high.
So at the junior high level for ELA, we do utilize Vista. So Vista is
that's translating?
Yeah. So that's not true. So Vista is the curricular resource that's utilized, and it's in English. So it's English only. Where the translation may come in is within the content areas. And that is in the content areas, the information is given to them in English. Some students in the beginning years, when they're first coming into us, they may use, where the translating may occur is we allow teachers to use a platform called Streamer. And then for our students it's giving them the opportunity to hear the content, the directions in their native language if they need it, in order to be able to access what is being asked of them. And then that's why we see the success in math, because when we remove the barrier of language and we get them to understand what skills they need to be able to produce, they're able to show us and to do that. So we allow that program of Streamer because it really allows our students to be able to highlight and showcase what they can do in a content when it's not about the language. Now in ELA, it is about English. So in there, we try to reduce the amount of translation that's occurring because the goal is for them to learn English and be able to assimilate and acclimate. Now there is some, beginning phases where there are some translations of directions and just building that culture and the SEL awareness and making sure there's a community. And that's where they may do some of those pieces. But the whole curriculum that they use in Vista and the code is all English. No translation of that is given to them during that time of the day.
All right, so we're going to kind of step outside the ESL and newcomer world of the multilingual department and move into dual language. And I'll kick it off with some literacy. My name is Alyssa Coker, and I'm the literacy coordinator for the district. We started our literacy journey back in 2021 with the Literacy Council group of teachers and administrators, and worked closely alongside the dual language leadership team that started a year later to bring new curricular resources in the area of literacy. I'll say that our resource benchmark, Adelante and Advance, along with our junior high and monolingual and dual language Polish resources are all Common Core state standards aligned. In addition to the Common Core state standards, which all students are taught, Spanish dual language also has some Spanish foundational skills in the language of Spanish that we teach into across all grade levels. So
During the pilot process, or the review process, we looked at 5 resources, piloted 2, and then adopted benchmark Adelante, that is teaching in Spanish and advanced teaching in English back in 2023. We purchased the advanced portion of that program, so our dual language Spanish teachers had direct correlation to text that they would be reading in Spanish, that they would have some text written in English. Because as you could see, all the topics, the units of study that the students participate in are integrated in content. And many of them are science and social science, with some at the early levels, some social emotional learning. The job of that, I would be remiss to not take a moment here to acknowledge Ms. Jessica Amaya behind me and Mrs. Christine Ibarra, 2 of our literacy and language coaches that have done tremendous work to bring these resources to life for our teachers. According to our language allocation. So when were we teaching in Spanish and when would we be teaching in English? And a bit of our biliteracy time that I'll speak to in a moment. And Fleming will also go into the science and social science a little bit later as well. Can Thank I you. ask, is this different than the literacy program for the monolingual students? Yeah, our monolingual and our dual language Polish utilize HMH into reading.
Is there a reason why they're different? Does HMH have a Spanish?
They do,
component?
but the program is a translation program. When we were looking into and going through the review stage, the biggest driver for our Spanish dual language was to have something that was authentic. So even in benchmark, you might have a text in advance that was written in English first, and it wouldn't translate well. So there might be an authentic text. Can you think of any ladies off the top of your head? No, from advanced. No, I was in a 5th grade class and I'm like, "Whoa, this one is like different Spanish." It was great that they were being exposed to a different dialect.
If I can just add to that, I think the biggest thing when teachers were looking at, because when we went through the entire review process, there were representatives of dual language teachers there, as well as our monolingual teachers for English. And I think the piece that they were looking at is with the HMH, it was almost identical English and Spanish. So it was a mirror of, if we're reading the 3 bears, we're reading los tres osos. So it didn't look like it was authentic to learning the progression of Spanish the way it should be with
translation.
with teaching of the vowels first and the progression of literacy and how that is, and then that integration. The other piece that Adelante, and I know they'll talk to as well, is that there was that focus of that metalinguistic and that comparison, the cross-linguistic transfer. So it was very explicit within Adelante of, here's how we do it in Spanish, but here's the link to English, and make sure you make that connection with students. So it was very transparent for teachers to start to see, here is the clear connection. So now I need to explicitly ensure that our students understand that cross-linguistic transfer. And when teachers started to see that, that's what we mean by authentic Spanish. Like, we don't mean it was just written in Spanish. The authenticity is that it doesn't have to be the same text in English and Spanish, but it has to be, the skills should be the same, and developing how you use that. The text that you use should be authentic to how you're teaching the language. That's what they were looking for.
Okay, thank you. And just a last question on this slide. The benchmark report, is this what the board is seeing or going to start seeing when we get our benchmark reports?
That's for us. The benchmark is the company
Oh, so
that
it's
the
not-
publisher
okay.
of Adelante.
It's not an
That's not
actual benchmark
benchmarking
test.
assessment.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but we will get into that later about what our benchmark is, what our benchmark assessments are for dual language.
We will be
Later.
talking about
Oh,
assessments later in
okay.
the
Thank you.
presentation. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. So just a couple of highlights. Some of these slides came from our presentation. So some of you might have seen it back a few years ago when we were proposing this. So just some highlights of benchmark that you could see that there's print and digital resources for our teachers, just like our HMH into reading. And there's many text sets with grade level content for each of our units. You could see that they're authentic into the Spanish language. There's a lot of white space in our resources for annotations that the students use the booklets right there and can highlight, circle, and make some notes on the side. You could see a screenshot of some of the vocabulary instruction that we've obviously spoken about in all of our programs with all of our students, that there's some nice routines inside of Benchmark that pre-teach scaffolded activities to utilize that content-specific language. We also, you could see there's some general academic, but then also some content-specific words. There's passages then at the end. So this is some of the assessment that is within our Benchmark curriculum, that they're grade level appropriate to assess their skills in reading, writing, and some of the language standards. And then Benchmark is great with plenty of other diagnostic type of assessments. The teachers have a lot of, it looks just like a workbook, as you could see some screenshots there that they can utilize in their classroom. So I would want to be clear here with the assessment question that any of these assessments within our Benchmark resource is really high utility for the teachers. It really guides their instruction day to day with some activities they do, maybe lesson to lesson because we've been working on theme over a couple of days, and then even for a unit and assessing some of those priority skills. So we've been really kind of digging into in this year 2 of literacy implementation about the assessment and how within our curricular resources, those assessments are high utility for teachers to decide what are some moves, what are some small groups I might need to make, what do I might need to reteach.
And I think just to that slide, it's also the assessments are measuring the skills of literacy, not the language of Spanish. So not their proficiency levels in Spanish and how they're doing within the 4 domains, but it's targeting towards the skills that would be the same skills that students are learning in the monolingual classroom. So here, those skills, you know, what that's what they're assessing them on in this point.
Like this one, they're asking about a character and what sentence would best describe that character. Same exact thing that might be happening in a monolingual or dual language Polish classroom. Thank you, Anne. So then specific to the Spanish language, right, we are doing some daily explicit systematic instruction in the Spanish language and also English. I'll speak about that in a second. The resource has great feedback for teachers that teachers can utilize as they're teaching the foundational skills, and plenty of resources like the anchor charts and supplemental materials. In addition to that, you know, literacy is never ends. So we're also doing grammar and language skills. And that again is located right in there. And as I spoke, our literacy and language coaches, we have scope and sequence documents that outlines all of this for the teachers for that support. So speaking of what Dr. Perdomo and I were referencing is this biliteracy time. So this time is unique in our dual language programming. So we know that our bilingual learners use reading, writing, listening, speaking, all that in 2 languages throughout their instructional day. But during this specific time in the literacy block, that I'm speaking about is a time for that cross-linguistic transfer, the translanguaging, the bridge, and the meta-linguistic focus. Code switching can all be occurring on that time. And those are a lot of words. The coaches have a little handout for you if you want to have the definitions of all those words. We took some time with the dual language leadership team to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we mean. But it is that time in the day that we're explicitly teaching in the opposite language from the unit of instruction. So let's say we're in a 2nd grade class, they went into unit 2, we were reading all about characters in Spanish, we had the text, we're doing all the work that you saw on the previous slides. This time in the day is to transfer that language into the English language then. So we could see we would be using an English text here, and then we have some focus skills. In K2, those focus skills are a lot in the foundational skills, where we are saying what has some positive or negative transfer between the languages. For instance, students, if they're learning, the MA says in Spanish, we don't have to teach that again. We just have to bring it to our students that that letter or that sound is represented in both of our languages. And it doesn't always happen. So we have a lot of examples that the coaches could share if needed, how they outline that for the teachers. It's an ongoing process. We have a lot of documents to try to make that clear for our teachers. So you could see in this one here, it says the very last bullet point, the sound spelling of the R blends that they're working on in English has a positive English-Spanish transfer. The R blends work the same in both of those languages, and we're making that apparent to our students. I'll pause.
I'm sorry, before you move on.
Yes.
I would love to get all of those definitions.
Yes, we will have
That would be
for
great.
you. You want to just go hand that up to?
And what I just want to reemphasize what Alyssa had mentioned is that these definitions is something that we just didn't create on our own by ourselves. We had the dual language leadership team take part in this, and then we shared this out with all of our dual language teachers, Spanish and Polish, to ensure that all of our teachers had that clear understanding, because when we hear the word bridge, we all have our interpretation of what that means. So we wanted to make sure there was a common definition of what it is, what it's intended to mean within the realm of a dual language programming. So it's also not just, let's just create it from the 59, standpoint. It is what research says the bridge is. It's research says what metalinguistic focus is, and then ensuring that our teachers understand that difference between what is translanguaging, what is code switching, what is translating, and all of those small little nuances, but they mean something very different in the world of language. So that's what we made sure that all of our teachers had that clear understanding. But at first, we as a dual language leadership team had to make sure we had the same common understanding, because if we didn't, then how do we expect to ensure that all of our teachers have that? And then more importantly, how do we make sure our students understand that as well? So we took that time to make sure that we did that. And this work was done last year and has been into our classrooms and supporting that work now.
Last piece about literacy is just not only the resource we have now, but thinking about our instruction of where we were with the Lucy Calkins units of study that we had previously, K through 8, and what we have now. So this is very specifically, of course, to our Spanish dual language. When we think about what we had access to what we have access to now. So everything in the past when we use those units of study was translated. There was, in every unit of study, and regardless of the programming, there was some lack of that connections within the domains of literacy. And then we also had a separate phonics program. So with using Benchmark Adelante and Advance, it's comprehensive, standards aligned. We hit all aspects of our literacy standards, including that strong foundational skills that's built right in. And I'll say too, this is all supported by the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan. I believe I've shared some information with you on that in the past, that's just adopted. So we're in direct alignment with what the Illinois state is saying.
So while we're on this topic, how does the amount of writing that the students do in each language compare to sort of the monolingual classes? Because I think that was a point of one of the reasons we know that students who do a dual language program do so well is they spend a lot more time on those skills.
Yeah, so with the writing, that's just one piece of the literacy block. So we have twofold. When we are thinking of writing, there's two major ways we write. Is response to reading, and then maybe some process writing from a prompt, where we're bringing in all of our knowledge from our content from that unit and writing to a prompt, and it's maybe longer, whatever it might be appropriate for the grade. So those two pieces of writing happen daily within our literacy block. Depending then on the language allocation, the writing will happen in that language that the unit is being taught in.
There is a performance task, though, in the opposite language. So when we get near the end of the unit in the biliteracy time, we should see some more writing happening as they gain some more English skills, if it went Spanish to English, to share some of their knowledge that they've learned.
Were coaches ever utilized in this curriculum since it's newer? Were they used last year? Are they considered now to just help support teachers since it's a newer curriculum?
Where coaches are utilized, like these ladies back here.
Oh, is that what you are? Okay.
Yes, they are. They're two of our literacy language coaches, and they don't have a spare minute. They don't have a spare minute. Jessica mainly works with our kindergarten through second grade teachers, and Christine works with our third through fifth. They are out at buildings all the time, meeting with teachers for that support. They've modeling a whole lot of our student-centered coaching. And I could say too, like I mentioned at the start, done a lot of work behind the scenes then to make sure that our teachers have what they need when they're dealing with, to Adelante and advanced, and they're using that appropriately at their grade levels.
Can I just ask how many of you there are coaches?
Just these two right here, right now.
Okay,
Yes.
is that enough? I'm sorry. I wish we could have more of you. But I mean, just asking the question.
Yeah.
If you could have,
Yes, we are looking at our coaching model. We slightly changed this year, so we're constantly looking at the number of teachers that teach in all of our programs and the correct support. So we'll reevaluate this spring and make some changes if needed for next year.
I'm just curious while we're on this subject, are
Yeah.
teachers ever maybe surveyed about whether they could use that support, if that would be helpful?
For a coach to
Mhm.
utilize coaches. I wouldn't say that they know. We've developed the understanding that coach is a support. It's an embedded professional development for our teachers. So they see our coaches deliver Institute Day sessions all the time. They're out and about in the building, so they know that that's their way to get support in the classroom.
Okay, I just was wondering if teachers are being asked if they feel they could use more support. That was more my question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
were they just
Yeah.
being surveyed to ask if they
I don't
could
think
use
we've
more
done
help?
Dr. Robinson is in charge of our coaching. I'm trying to think if we've done a
We haven't done a survey
specific.
in the past few
Yeah.
years. We've
Yeah,
done surveys.
yeah.
And
That's something we can definitely think about.
I
yeah.
think, and we have some principals in the audience,
Oh.
I think conversations that happen directly with your grade level teams is
Mhm.
the best way to get that information.
Yeah.
Surveys wouldn't be necessarily the tool that I think they would use to identify coaching needs. Miss, yes.
We are having all of our literacy language coaches at our PLC tomorrow.
We're going to have all of our literacy and language coaches and our literacy and math coaches at our PLCs tomorrow. So they're going to see all of our grade level teams and provide support on developing instructional strategies based on our iReady data. So we at Rupley, we have a lot of opportunities for our coaches to come in and offer support for our teachers. And during that time, we do ask, like, what else additional do you need? Do you need one-on-one coaching? So that's kind of where they drum up their coaching business during our PLCs.
And the other piece of that is, we also have our MLP facilitators who support on the programmatic side of it. So a lot of our school principals reach out to them to do, PD sessions. So Edie's out at the junior highs because she's, that's her focus is junior high newcomer, but not just working with newcomers. They also pull her in to support ESL students as well. So holistically, we were just at John Jay with our MLP facilitators, Andrea and Sarah. They did a workshop on supporting newcomers and dual language and the similarities that our students share within our programming. And what does it mean to be a language teacher? So they did those pieces, and there we always encourage our teachers to reach out to us and show them that we're available at any point in time. Our MLP facilitators also serve as mentors for our new dual language teachers, so they meet with them weekly, or if bi-weekly, if not weekly, making sure that they feel supported and they feel that they have whatever it is that they need. And then I would say, and I would echo what Alyssa say. Jessica and Christine we all work tirelessly, but tirelessly are out there supporting teachers, and there's not enough time in the day.
Well, that's why I'm asking if we need more, because there's not, you can only do so much. And that's what the board can do, can allocate resources. So.
Yeah, I think it's not, I think what we're doing is what we're really working on is building the capacity of our teachers. And I think right now we've had such an influx of newcomer students and such an influx of EL students that I think when it comes to that, to your question, do we need more? I don't know if it's necessarily more individuals. What we do need is more time to work with our staff in order to give them the PD and the supports that they need, because there's just not enough time in the day to do that. We can do one-offs and meet teachers on their plan time and all of that, but that's also dedicated time for them where they need to be able to recapture those pieces. So we have our PLT times that we have institute days that we always are doing sessions on. But I think if we can have unlimited amounts of opportunity to provide PD for teachers, I think that would be building a capacity for our teachers to teach each other and build on those skills.
As Alyssa shared previously, the content at elementary for dual language will exactly mirror the text and the topics that are within the text in benchmark. So for instance, you could see up here, what we do is we have pulled priority lessons out of both of the core resources. And at elementary, we use STEM scopes for science and we use inquiry journeys for social science. And we pull those out, and this teachers will have a sequence of priority lessons meeting those priority standards. These lessons will almost enhance what they have done with their text in the literacy time, because it's an extension of that content, but they're going to go deeper and they're going to meet then those content standards. It's not always perfect. There are some units that are more SEL-based units. So what we have is we do then the content at the end of that unit. So they are still receiving all of the content and meeting all of those requirements and standards and mandates. There is an additional in 3rd through 5th grade. We also have additional week-long mini content units. We have a couple coming up in 5th grade for science, again, just because we want our kids to be well adept in order to be prepared with that language and those writing skills that they need to tackle some of those upcoming assessments as well. The language of instruction in the content will be the same as the literacy. So if they are teaching in Spanish, then the content will be in Spanish, and then they will bridge and they will make those connections to English during the biliteracy time. If they are teaching it in English, then they will then use that biliteracy time to then also reinforce that language in Spanish during the biliteracy time. We do have a very heavy focus on that academic vocabulary and the academic language so that we can give our kids as much exposure and as much background building knowledge so that they can tackle some of those texts as they move through the grades and hope and improving their comprehension skills.
Okay, back to math. As we talk about dual language math, I'm going to talk specifically around our K-5. And as I had shared before, our core curriculum for K-8 is illustrative math. We are on our 4th year of implementation. Last year, completed our comprehensive implementation plan for this curriculum. Being that we are accessing illustrative math, we access it through the Imagine Learning platform. But you can see here, regardless of whether you're monolingual or dual language program, our math block structure is consistent across programming. Here you can kind of see the outline in kindergarten. Outside of the illustrative math 1-hour block of instruction is an additional number corner opportunity to kind of have opportunities to learn around some foundational number sense skills around a calendar routine, which is really great for our students as they enter elementary school. As we enter into grades 1 through 5, we have that illustrative math block of time as well, and then an additional math win block, that 30 minutes additional. Regardless of which program you're in, we have a common scope and sequence that our teachers follow with the units of study across all grade levels. with an additional pacing elements that are allocated for our dual language classrooms for that opportunity to bridge and extend the academic language from one language to the other. So part of our language allocation plan that we have identified in K2, all math instruction is delivered in Spanish. Third grade is a 50-50 model. So they get the first half of the year is in Spanish. And then in the second semester, third grade receives their math instruction in English. And then fourth and fifth grade receive all of their math instruction in English. That really helps support that transfer as they go into junior high and having that opportunity to really receive that instruction in English and support with some of the assessments. Despite the language of instruction, as I had mentioned, they do have those opportunities to transfer that language. Some of those additional pacing days within our calendar allow for that opportunity to experience the language, which are those academic vocabulary terms for math, and opportunities towards the end of the unit to bridge and extend that the language from whatever language of instruction it was in, whether that be English into Spanish and vice versa. Regardless of the language of instruction, it's important to note that both dual language and our non-dual language teachers and students do have full access to our curriculum, both in English and in Spanish. And all of the translations are authentic Spanish translations that are embedded within the curriculum.
Are any dual language students in the TDP program in math or English? I mean, specifically math, I guess I'm asking.
I mean, our allocation for that, the identification process does not, it allows anyone to access the TDP program.
Are there students in it? I mean, I don't expect the
Yes,
exact
we
number,
could.
but
Yes,
yes, please.
yeah. Yes.
Yes.
It's just amazing. We have this year, there's a newcomer in the TDP program. And I am in constant communication. Thank you. This year, we have a TDP, we have a newcomer, brand new to this country this year in the TDP program. I'm in constant communication with this TDP teacher, making sure he's understanding, making sure he's able to communicate what he needs to communicate. It's awesome. Yes. So yes.
Yeah, I was hoping to hear that. Yeah.
Yes, it is amazing.
And that's not unique to just Berkeley School. We have newcomers in a couple of our schools that are also in TDP. Sorry, I do oversee the TDP program. So we have newcomers in various schools, as well as many students, EL students and students in the dual language program. We make sure that our identification process takes the language barriers out as much as possible so that students can shine through no matter what.
And then I always have the question, do we have a SLA TDP maybe in mind, or opportunities for exceptional students to demonstrate additional skills?
In Spanish?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. We have a TDP action plan. You know, we just concluded an audit of our program. One piece that we want to see is as we are able to hire an additional teacher, maybe through attrition or whatever it may be, to get teachers who have additional languages and can support those. Currently, all of our TDP staff are monolingual English, but we do provide opportunities for dual language as much as possible.
And then this next slide is just to show that regardless of ESL, newcomer, dual language, all of our students have the opportunity to integrate into their specials and physical education classes. So, we don't try to keep them tracked into one model. So they all get to be integrated within their peers. And I think that's important for them to be socially part of the school environment. And then also just to be able to be with your peers and learn language and just make friends and have a good time in that way as well. Ongoing professional learning and support of staff. I know, Mrs. Notini was talking about, do we need more and how do we continue to support our staff? So we do curriculum resource specific training. So this is done at Institute Days in the summer, during our PLTs, all of those different opportunities we have, we have specific training that's from the publisher and as well our instructional coaches. So, we do that, the build the trainer, the train the trainer model to ensure that everybody is getting that information and doing that. This past summer, we did a dual language reboot, and we got to bring in Dr. Jose Medina, who is a researcher in dual language, and he provided kind of that reboot in the C6 framework and understanding dual language philosophy and the importance of the acquisition of not only Spanish, but English as well, and how that needs to be the end result of programming. What's been great of this is that our MLP facilitators, during this opportunity in the summer, only 40 individuals were able to participate in the summer, but we wanted to make sure that all dual teachers had this opportunity to get it. So Spanish and Polish. This isn't about language. This is about best practices of dual language to get students to become proficient in both languages and meet those pillars of dual language. So Edie, Andrea, and Sarah have been replicating this training. They've done it now 3 times, and we'll continue to do it at each of our Institute Days, and we'll do it again in the summer because our goal is that we want all dual language teachers to have this opportunity to be able to receive this PD and training as well. We have our ESL and newcomer ongoing PD job alikes. So something that's been great is that our ESL elementary teachers meet with Andrea once a month in order to get just professional development and be able to collaborate and have their own PLC and have that opportunity, because for many of them, they're 1 or 2 in each building. So they want to be able to have that opportunity to just collaborate and connect with a peer that's doing the same thing that they're doing and build off of that. With junior high, it's a little bit more difficult. So we have, it's been amazing that we've been able to do this during our Institute Days. Now we do have a job alike for our junior high teachers. The reason why they don't do it once a month is our ESL elementary teachers, because they do that pull-out model, they don't need a sub in order to receive that professional development and have that job alike opportunity. Because our junior high teachers are teaching classes during a sheltered class, they would require a sub, and we know that trying to get subs for all of our junior highs at any given time is very difficult, especially when we're asking 8 or 9 newcomer teachers to come together to be able to do that. That's a lot on our buildings and being able to support. But Edie has done a great job in working in collaboration with our newcomer teachers during Institute Day to really, again, to give them that opportunity to collaborate and connect and being able to meet. We would love to do that more often. The difficult part is, as I mentioned, with our schedules, because our junior high newcomer teachers teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They're in a schedule where a lot of it overlaps, so they don't have that common plan time with others. Next year, that's something that will be addressed with the schedule, so I know they're excited about just having that opportunity as well. We continue to do coaching support for teachers, and then conference attendance. And conference attendance and allowing our teachers to be able to go and not just hear from us, but also be able to hear from professionals in the field. And what's fantastic about it is our teachers that have gone to conferences. So I know, like, we have Viesha, who's an ESL teacher at Brentwood. She's in the audience, and Sandra Lombard is in our audience too. They have attended conferences, and when they have come back, they have in tandem presented with Andrea. I know Wes and Jamie Stoller had the opportunity to attend a conference there in the audience as well. They were able to present during their Institute Days, and in their buildings, they get to present what they're learning so that others are getting that opportunity as well. I wish we could send every single teacher every single time to a conference, but we, fiscally, we can't do that. But we want to make sure that those that do get to go and those that do have that opportunity do that. And then if the question arises, well, how do we choose? We ask our teachers, and we try to be as fair as possible and giving opportunities. If a teacher has gone to a conference this year, we're not going to send them next year and the year after. We want to give that opportunity to others, but we also want to know that what we learn is being brought back and it's being shared with the majority, so that it's not just a one-off thing for everybody. So our current assessments that we have in language in general, right now, the district MTSS team is working in participation with the Literacy Squared cohorts and understanding and really gaining that knowledge of an assessment trajectory for dual language students to really identify where our students are in their path towards biliteracy, to ensure that we're making those clear connections between Spanish and English. And then we're also eventually looking, how do we build that with Polish once we can identify an assessment with them as well. So this is ongoing work that's being taking place currently. And then that is in tandem with the piloting of an alternative assessments this spring. So right now we're in conversations. We currently use iReady for English, and we currently have been using iReady in Spanish. We know that right now iReady in Spanish is not fully developed or not producing the same reports. And giving we've heard the feedback from teachers and from, receiving the same information that they get in English. So what we're doing is we're being, we're taking that feedback and being aware, and we're looking at 3 other possible assessments and seeing if it is a opportunity for us to explore. So this spring, our schools will have an opportunity to, teachers will have an opportunity to explore these assessments with students and see what kind of data are we getting from it. How can we utilize that data? Is it data that's going to be meaningful? And is it something we want to explore further or not? We're also in hopes that iReady is, talking about being fully developed for the upcoming school year. So we have our fingers crossed for that as well. But we also want to do our due diligence that if in case they're not, we have something that we're looking at the same time.
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. So is it just like unheard of to have an assessment for dual language, or are there like districts that do assessments in dual language and they're just not very good assessments? Or
yeah, so the assessments in dual language, so it's not a lot of normed assessments that are fully developed are not fully available yet. I think that's the struggle that there's pieces of it that's developed, and there's each vendor that we look at, I wouldn't say they're the silver bullet and it's fully comprehensive and that they have everything that we need in order to make the apples to apples comparison between English and Spanish. And I think that's the struggle when we're really building that trajectory and understanding our students holistically from a bilingual standpoint, is that we're struggling in finding that parallel assessment to really make those decisions that clearly indicate where students are in both languages and how do we navigate those instructional decisions for them. We're doing the best that we can with what we have, but that's why we're trying to explore other opportunities and vendors. And we've researched other districts, and being part of this trajectory cohort, we are in talks with a lot of districts, not only in Illinois, but across our country. And what are you using? What are some successes you have? And that's why we identified 3 vendors, because that's what others are using to see if they're having some success. Let's see if we would get that same success as well. How they measure success is open to interpretation. But we're obviously trying to figure out what is the best for our students and our demographics, and really is going to lead us to where we want to go with our students.
Great.
And then we also, at the bottom, we have that consideration of an interim language assessment for newcomer ESL students to support. One of the things that we continue to have that conversation of is we take access in January. So right now we're preparing for access. Students are starting, the window just opened today. We'll take access, and then we'll get scores in May. And then we'll have those scores. Students go home. So they come back for the summer. We have that information to help us navigate where we want to start instruction in August, but we're using scores from the previous January. And then we have to wait until the following May to get updated scores on there linguistically. And we would hope, and I know that our students are making growth throughout the year. So we're looking at the possibility of an interim language assessment to really identify, and more importantly at the junior high level, to have a normed data set to say, here is information to show that our students are growing linguistically, or maybe not, but then we can make better decisions, not only in giving them opportunities to transition to a core classroom, TDP opportunities, and also, though, to identify MTSS. If they need intervention support, is it appropriate for them, and where are they linguistically? Because right now, in our next slide, we'll talk about the MTSS process. They follow the same spectrum that all students follow, with the exception of we look at the linguistic score. But we're looking at a linguistic score, again, from a year in the rear. So we want to have more up-to-date data. And of course, our teachers are fantastic, and they'll give us they'll give us their feedback, and we'll look at end-of-unit assessments, but they're not necessarily measuring language. They're measuring skills. So when we talk about this interim assessment, it's strictly to measure that language development in English to ensure that we know where our students are progressing, and then we can do a better job of supporting their language needs instead of waiting for access each year in the rear. So being a little bit more strategic and proactive in our supports to language acquisition versus being reactive to getting the access scores.
Why does it take so long to get the access scores?
If I had that
Sorry, I know you wanted
If
me.
you and I can go to the state together, we can petition for things. I don't know. Illinois. I wish we would get them sooner. You know, I don't know. It just takes a long time, which is why it's nice when we do like an assessment, like a lost links, where we get that within 10 to 15 days, we have results of where our students are, and it's giving us a precursor of where they're at for access. I know I joke and I say sometimes, I get it. Illinois is, they're assessing and they're scoring hundreds and hundreds of students across state. So it's not just about 59. And when we do those one-off assessments like lost links, or we do an interim assessment, they're able to give us that turnaround a lot quicker, because their primary focus is us, and their primary focus is our testing window, because we assign those testing windows. So I get it. But I do, and we have advocated, I serve on the Council for Bilingual Education at the state level, and that's one of our biggest things, is we need to be more proactive on getting scores. And we get our scores in May, and those are preliminary scores. So we don't actually get our actual scores until July. And then we don't get progress through proficiency scores until the following January.
Yeah, and I would also point out that's not just an issue for dual language.
Yeah, that's everywhere.
It's a bullet point in the Vision 2030
Ooh,
to try and
awesome.
encourage the state to get us test scores faster.
And just regarding access, there's a spoken portion, or is most of it a speaking sort of assessment, or some of it?
The access is all 4 domains. So they have listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So they take each of those sections, each of those domains, they are assessed in. So yes, they do have a speaking component where they do record themselves, and they have to speak into the computer system. And then it is not a rehearsed response. So the way that Access works is they hear the prompt, and then they have a certain amount of time to capture their thoughts. Like, and when I say time, I mean like 15 seconds before they have to hit record. And once they hit record, that's it. It's a one time. You record what you said, and it's because what they don't want is a rehearsed response that's been edited, and they want to see it in the moment. Can the student navigate the language? That's our big struggle with our teachers. You know, we're really reinforcing how do we support our students and allow them more opportunities to record themselves throughout the year so they can hear themselves. Because I, even right now, think that I'm speaking very eloquently and articulating myself very well. And then I'll go home and watch, and I'll be like okay, well, I'll take a seat. So it's those pieces when students can hear themselves, and we can give them that feedback, and they can hear themselves and really understand how, you know, listen to the language that you're using, listen to the words you could have used. Did you pause in that sentence? Though that's all we're looking at. What is their vocabulary usage? What is their context of language, their sentences that they're utilizing? That is where we're trying to support our students in better understanding how to navigate the assessment and do the best that they can when they're doing.
Is that part of just daily instruction or weekly instruction?
So it is.
Oh, we have someone raising their hands.
I'm the ESL person at Brentwood, and I am very lucky because I have 4 teammates working with me. Three. I'm the 4th one. Thank you. I can't count, but whatever. The really neat part of having such a more than one person at that position is we look at the data, we separate the kids into their proficiency levels, and then give them kind of assessment. Right now, it's like an observation, a logging of, oh, they're doing this and this, and then try to make them better in any of the domains that we're working on. So because I am the senior ESL support teacher, I usually take the higher grade levels, the higher proficiency level, because I work with the writing. The writing comes to them the last domain kind of strong. So I actually point out, we do a lot of writing, and then they have to read it back to me. And then does it sound right like you're talking? Because writing is supposed to sound like you're talking. Is there something we can change? So we work on it the whole year through. And then, so each of us has, and then we get together every 8 weeks and say, I think this student needs to be in a different group because they're falling behind. You know, I need to move on with the group and they're not doing as well. So we change the groups a little bit. Okay. Also happens that sometimes the children go on an 8-week vacation to their country and come back and speak, even though they scored really well on the Access the year before. They've left the country for a while, come back and speak less English than the Access score says they do. So that's what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think with our daily instruction, what we've done a bigger emphasis on is that building that oracy, allowing students to just talk and have that natural opportunities for discussion. And that's one of the other reasons why we did that partnership in SEL with the township, because it just gave our students feeling that safe environment, especially at the junior high. When they're walking into this building and it's new to the country and they're teenagers, they're looking to self-discover who they are. That's where when we're talking to the newcomer teachers, they were saying we just need an opportunity for them to just be able to express who they are. And that's where that partnership with the township really helped and worked. And we saw our students to break out of their shell and just want to speak and being able to talk and being able to just be themselves and allow them to do that. So I think the start of that is just having students being able to use their voice to be able to do that. So daily instruction means just building that oracy with them on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to do is second that, because being part of the team at Robert Frost with Chris Vicente has really created a big shift in how the ESL and the ELL community is viewed. And I think it has elevated how we are addressing access, how we are preparing our students for access. So, going back and forth with teammates to decide, okay, this student is at this level and hasn't made any progress since I don't know how long. And then we've been asked, to sit in some MTSS meetings to decide if the student is needing extra support other than language. So that shift in having a team rather than one ESL teacher has made a huge difference. This year we were able to prepare all of our students. So Chris and I took 1 hour of every single grade to prepare them for the access test. And we show them how to record and what button to press and how loud to speak and how much do you have to do and how to take a deep breath before you start speaking, because really the speaking part I think is the one that's the most difficult for our students, and it was difficult for me. So I remember taking my test and saying, okay, speak, and you're like, what? So they definitely do need that practice, and it has to be, and being able to give the test this time around has given me that insight, like, okay, the following year, I have to increase the amount of, of speaking opportunities and elevate the oral language and all of that. So, I think giving the test, if every teacher could give the test to see what it looks like, would be a great idea. Because then you know what you're looking for, so you know how many sentence structures you have to provide and what it means to support the ELL students in the classroom. So that and like I said, going back to one person to a team, that's just been
And
really,
every
really
elementary
amazing.
school has this
So
team?
I think it's
or-
I'm not sure, actually, I can't speak for that.
All schools have EL students in their building, and all schools do have ESL teachers, so they have that team. And just to echo what Ms. Gonzalez was talking about, is there's been a shift in culture of really elevating what access and that assessment is and bringing value to it, especially at the junior high. I think if we can give them a shout out, the junior highs, what they have done is that every teacher gets certified to give access, and every teacher is part of the proctoring of access to really elevate the idea that this is a community effort, especially at the junior high, because it's very hard to get students to make that growth and exit, because they've been, especially if they're long-term ELs, they've been taking it for so long. At this point, they're like, I just don't want to do it anymore. So for them to pause and just say, this is a collective effort, and many of our elementary schools do that too, but for our junior highs to really have that opportunity to really take that time and say every teacher is going to be trained and every teacher is a part of this proctoring process, I think is huge. And that is allowing our students to really feel why this assessment is important and the value that it has for our students. So then we go to the MTSS process. The district MTSS process is the same for all students, with the exception of, again, looking at those linguistic levels as we talked about. So we look at where their academic ability is, but then we also look at where their linguistic levels are, because we have to take into account, is this language or is it truly an academic concern? And we have to, and it's a fine line. It's a fine line. So there's no, there's no clear-cut answer on when it's what. So we have to look at a lot of different data points, listen to teachers. They have a lot of data that they can provide, and where we feel this student falls and what supports the student needs. EL students have access to all district provided interventions when appropriate. And then in Spanish, what we have been doing is been trying to elevate our Spanish intervention options. So we did adopt Estrellitas and Fugaces, which is really supporting our students in this foundational language of the progression of Spanish. And then we have ANEAL, which also is a Spanish intervention. And then we have the code, which is English, but also given to our EL students to really support them with those foundational skills of literacy as well.
So can you elaborate a little bit on what the interventions are?
Yeah, so Estrellitas and Fugaces, so each of these are literacy assessments.
Okay.
And what they do is they focus on those skills of foundational skills. So if a student is so like Estrellitas, for example, is mainly for like our K1, 2 students, and mainly for our students who come from a predominant Spanish background, whose Spanish is their strongest language. So we would intervene first in Spanish to really build those skills in their native language first, and then being able to help them make those transfers to English in that piece. So, and also depending on their journey in language, we have to make some of those difficult decisions. So a student who is in 4th grade, we have that tough decision of native language might be Spanish, but at this point, do we intervene in English because we need to get them to that level of English acquisition? So we make those decisions, and at the upper elementary grades, we look at English being the language of intervention to make sure that they are being elevated in order to be successful in junior high and beyond. So that's what I said, there's no clear-cut answer on when they get what. It's looking at each individual student and what they need at that time to do that. What's great is we've taken the approach that all students have this access, because all students can benefit from the support. What we've created the culture on is that if they're getting the support to enhance their language, then it's a support. It is not an intervention. Not knowing English isn't a deficit. It's an opportunity to learn it. So we give them the supports to be able to grow and learn, but we don't call it an intervention at that moment in time, but they're accessing the same curricular resource that a student who might have been here since kindergarten and now is in 5th grade, and they truly need it as an intervention. So we've opened it up to allow our students to all have access to it, where in the past it sometimes was, well, they're a newcomer, maybe they shouldn't get it, let them have time to learn the language. But sometimes with that, is it too late? So we want to make sure that we're always giving them the supports early on right away. Or not right away, but giving them the supports that they need at the time that they need it.
How does the Adelante curriculum support students who are behind grade level that might not meet the criteria for MTSS?
Yeah, and you can chime in, or you guys want to chime in? So I know there's a lot of scaffolds built within the program itself. So the program does have students, leveled text. It does have annotations for teachers when students are either above grade, working above their capacity to be able to push them to the next level. It's also opportunities to pull back when they need to be able to reinforce and be able to scaffold more for those students as well during that differentiated time. So within that frame of time, there is different levels of complexity, just like what there is at the junior high level with StudySync. There's even at the junior high level, there's an EL component itself with different language levels, so that a teacher can say, okay, I'm going to look at this linguistic level of a 2.0, and I'm going to pull this out for the student, same text, but just a different complexity of the text in order for them to be able to access that a little bit differently. Anything else you want?
I guess the only other thing I wanted to share, and I'm Jessica Maya, I'm the K2 language and literacy coach with Spanish dual language and Polish dual language. But one of the things that I was able to do last year is really work with all of our K2 teachers to understand the progression of both Spanish and English. And the beautiful thing is that teachers have access to the entire K5 curriculum. And so if there are areas of need, then they're able to access, the previous grade materials. And then we work with them to create plans on how to fast track that. And so there's intervention materials within Benchmark that aren't official intervention materials. They're more like reteaching opportunities and lessons that teachers are able to utilize during small group instruction to reinforce those skills.
Very good. Thank you.
I would also add something that's really unique about Benchmark because we have Adelante and Advance is that let's say I'm teaching a unit out of Advance, there might be a note within a lesson that suggests if you have students that are learning English, this might be a support they need. But if I'm teaching out of Adelante in Spanish, that same thing exists for students that are learning Spanish. So if I have a student that's coming from a home that speaks English, it provides some suggestions on, oh, well, this is how English works compared to Spanish, and they might struggle with this piece of it. So you might consider teaching into this for your Spanish learners. So.
Well, I think we need more of you, so I hope we can.
And then some of our key strategic shifts that we've been talking about all along is we have a dual language leadership team. We bring this team together just to continue to collaborate and identify where do we want to go and how do we continue to move forward and how do we continue to elevate our programming. And again, this leadership team is inclusive of Polish and Spanish. So it's not about, again, language, it's about the programming itself. We have the adoption of the authentic literacy resource, as we talked about, professional learning focused on biliteracy best practices. I think that's really key in our shift in dual language programming from the past to now, is that our students, if you talk to our, if you enter a dual language classroom and talk to our students and even our teachers, what they'll say is throughout their day, it's much more connected. There is this connection between the entire day and what they're learning. And more importantly, if they're learning something in Spanish, they're able to apply it in English within that same day. If they're learning something in English, they're able to apply it in Spanish that same day. And there's that connectivity between all of that, where in the past, it was very disconnected. And they didn't have those opportunities to make those connections or even apply what they're learning from one language to another until the very end of a unit, which there's a lot you've learned within that time frame. So I think it's just very more connected with our students, and we're seeing that piece really support us. The integration of content into literacy as well has really allowed for that nice blend and being able to do that as well. Our newcomer curriculum scope and sequence, and we continue to evaluate that and how to support that, which again, we've had conversations with our junior high principals, and we're looking to make some shifts for 25-26 school year. And then our newcomer professional learning district and building led, we continue to have that emphasis within all of our buildings and district schools. And then next steps is for ESL and newcomers is we're looking to continue to strengthen our linguistic supports within their classroom. So in their monolingual classrooms, because they're there the majority part of the day. Their 30 minutes are being pulled out, but the rest of the time they're in their monolingual classroom, and we want to make sure that we're strengthening those supports consistently throughout the day. So the teachers are being supporting our students in a very language heavy. And then continue to provide the opportunities for students to access additional linguistic support. So we're also looking at how do we get creative for students that do need additional supports. Where do we find that time throughout the day? Because the struggle, which is real, and our principals and our teams at schools do a fantastic job, is we have students who need to have the legal requirement of ESL minutes, but also need the intervention support. And we can't pull from the same time. So when do we find that time creatively within the schedule where it's not taking students away from home group instruction, it's not taking them away from PE? We never do that, but that was a bad example. But it's making sure that we find those times throughout the day, and there's a lot of competing factors. So being able to give students everything that they need within a realm of time that we have. I've talked about our junior high and newcomer programming for next year, that interim assessment, and looking for those clear transitions to really support our teachers when they are advocating for students to go into a core classroom, and being able to provide them with more data to be able to do that. And then for dual languages, that assessment for biliteracy is really ensuring that our district has a true identifier of how we are measuring success in Spanish and in English for our students, because the goal of the program is for them to learn Spanish, but also to ensure that they come out linguistically capable and meeting the needs in English as well. So it's making sure that they're meeting those needs in both languages for our programming in dual language. And then questions and any questions you have. And again, we have the members in the audience if you have wanted to hear from them from a teacher standpoint on what their day looks like. Or
I know some of this depends on iReady and it's sort of out of your control. Does the district have any sort of timeline on when they might start presenting whatever assessment or mechanism they would like to use to demonstrate student growth? Is there any kind of timeline on when that will happen?
Yeah, so I think I would think, and I'm sure Tom would echo that, I think our district is trying to do the best that we can and doing that right now with what we currently have, you know, in being able to share our iReady data in English, but then also sharing our data in Spanish that we have, also looking at our lost links data for K, 2nd and 5th grade and identifying where our students at linguistically and doing those pieces. I think we're doing the best that we can in trying to find what is that measure of success right now. I think that's our next goal, is we're looking for what is that parallel assessment that we can truly have to really build out what does that framework look like for assessment, and what does our dual language program measures of success look like holistically once we have developed or identified what that Spanish assessment, benchmarking assessment is going to be long term. So whether that's iReady, and you know, if they do come fully prepared for next year, then I think we'll be able to fully develop and start to see those in tandem. And one of the things that we're talking about is when we share our data, is not looking at in Spanish and in English in isolation, but looking at holistically for that dual language student, so we can get a clear picture of what is everything that they know. Not as what do they know in English and what do they know in Spanish. You'll see it that way as well, but what do they know collectively, and ensuring that what is that measure of success for us, and then continuing to have that language assessment and measuring, are they on their path to biliteracy, not academically just with skills, but also with language. If we want them to fully be able to function in English, where are we getting our students to become that level 4.8 so they can exit access and become proficient? That's still not fluent, because 6 is fluent, but really getting them to that level to become proficient in that. So I think our timeline is as soon as we can find a parallel assessment, but I would like to acknowledge that we have continued that work, and we continue to do that work, and the assessment team continues to do the best that we can to bring that to light with what we have. So I know that that's a kind of a runaround. I know, I get it.
iReady has said that their adaptive assessment is going to be ready for next school year. So we are really hoping that that is the case. But like he said, but Dr. Bruno said earlier, we want to make sure we have a plan B in case we see that assessment, or it's not working effectively, or it doesn't have the components we need. So we want to really do our due diligence so we have the best Spanish assessment possible. So really, our goal is that next year, we're going to be able to start introducing you to what that trajectory looks like. When we get our benchmark data done in the fall, we can come back and we can show you where we are in developing that and how far we've come. But iReady has said that like next year is the year that we should have access to that one. And if we don't have that one, then we're going to have to figure out which one we're going to use. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, in the meantime, though, the board still needs to look at data and assess data and monitor data. You know, our benchmark data, will it continue to use iReady English? Yes. And then is there anything for Spanish that we're going to be looking at?
So currently we do have iReady in Spanish. So we have been utilizing that. The expectation moving forward, though, based on the knowing that it's not fully available and readily available to providing those resources that we have, is that's why we're doing those interim assessments. So we're going to have our teachers this spring use those interim assessments in lieu of, or in addition to. So iReady in Spanish will be an option for them, but not a requirement, because we also want to make sure that they have the opportunity to use one of these interim assessments to identify additional data that we can get from them. And then we just finished our lost links with our 5th grade. So we did get that data back, and we've collectively have looked at that data. So I'm sure, you know, Mr. Luloff, who can share that at the opportunity when it comes to the next data review. And then we'll be doing lost links for 2nd grade in the spring to give them almost a full year of growth in that language. And then we'll see how they're doing so that we can use that information to navigate conversations for 3rd grade for our students. So our goal is to still be able to be transparent and show the data that we have. But within iReady Spanish, some schools will give it as an option, and some schools will use the interim assessments that we're looking to identify to see what data they provide.
You know, I'm just one board member, but I welcome anything you'd like to show us in the next benchmark presentation, because I think at the last one, you know, we asked, was really the first time that we saw dual language on its own, and there were some concerns there. But I'm open for anything you'd like to show us, because we need a baseline, and we really are excited to see the growth that your new strategies and curriculum, can show us. So I'm hoping that you'll include, if there's other assessments you want to use other than iReady, I'd really like to see that.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, we'll notate them. Tom's gonna.
As in the fall, we'll include that same structure and framework in regards to ASR, the assessment of Spanish reading. We've worked with our principals and staff because it's not a norm test. It's basically how many you get right or wrong. When we don't really use it, and our staff have told us they're not using that, we have not made that an expectation. Some will use it, so I don't think we'll have ASR data to share across schools, which is fine, but we'll have all the breakouts as we've talked about. I mean, we are excited and hopeful that we can have similar norm data for our dual language students moving forward, because the reality, as we've always said, this is especially in reading, an English assessment for not just Spanish speakers, but hundreds of languages that are taking an assessment in a language that's not their first language. And we see that and feel it across the board. That's why we're working so hard as a district MTS team. But we'll absolutely share those pieces. Remember, the benchmark data is universal, summative type data. Much of what we talked about tonight is formative data teachers are using in their classroom to guide instruction. We don't force that process to be collected. We'd rather teachers use that data to plan instruction, then put it into a spreadsheet so I can come here and share it. So we'll stick with basically a similar process, and hopefully as we move through, we'll have more data to specifically on the dual language side to share.
All right. So what does the future for dual language look like in the junior high level?
Yeah, so I think we're still having, so I don't know if I'm ready to answer that. You know,
Yeah.
I think when appropriate, I'd love to see if it's something that we introduce, but again, it's toward that seal towards biliteracy. So our goal and our hope is that if we can get that utopia of dual language and continue to build towards that gold standard of dual language, our students in K-5 are meeting those expectations of becoming proficient in English and Spanish by the end of 5th grade, that when it comes to the junior high, it's more of the application of Spanish. So it's really using that of technical language and really starting to get prepared for high school towards those elevated Spanish classrooms, so that when they're ready to take that seal of biliteracy test, our 59 students are graduating with that stamp of approval and that seal of biliteracy. So our dual language classrooms should be elevating the Spanish and teaching the technical language and use of Spanish, not teaching students Spanish at the junior high. So I think we have to first get to that level and really ensure that we are capturing it from the K-5 standpoint first before we're ready to again move it back into the junior high level. And I would say I would hate to rush it without ensuring that we have a very systematic and well thought out plan at the elementary level with an assessment that's being measuring that level of success, so that when we can start building what that looks like at the junior high, we know what does the success look like at junior high then next. So hopeful that some type of Spanish elevation and students can continue to learn that. Whether we call it dual language or not is very different, because dual language is very to call something dual language, it means that there has to be 50% of the day has to be in Spanish, 50% of the day has to be in English. So systematically, can we do that within our structure of the day? Number one. Number two, do we have the staff allocation and the personnel with the licensure in order to teach? Because we get into that aspect of it. And then what classes are we going to be offering in Spanish and ensuring what that looks like? So I think that there's a lot of conversation to do that, but I think right now we want to focus our focus is really on dual language elementary. Our ESL students are always going to be a priority at the elementary level. And at the junior high, our priority is really our newcomer students and then our long-term EL. We really have to ensure that we're addressing that long-term EL so that when they get to high school, they have every opportunity possible to be on the track towards college readiness. Because the unfortunate thing is many students, when they are identified as EL, they are placed on a track and sometimes they're not given the same opportunities as other students, and we want to ensure that all students have that opportunity.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I do also want to shout out Renee back there from the township, because she's the bomb, and our township rocks. So I'm glad that we are working together with the township.
Yes. Oh, Ms. Stoller, come on up.
So we've heard a lot from the elementary school. My name is Jamie Stoller. I'm from Friendship Junior High, and Wes and I just kind of wanted to share our experience from the junior high perspective. I think this sheltered newcomer program is so valuable to our students. The sense of junior high for any student can kind of be a really tricky time on top of a new country, a new culture, a new language, a new school, especially if you're a student who you are the only person in that building that speaks that language. And we have students like that. So being able to have this sheltered program at the junior high creates such a sense of belonging for our students. In relation to our partnership with the township, having those SEL lessons has been so beneficial to the students in my class. For example, we talked about the access prep, and we've been doing a lot of that. And there had been, we've been doing a lot of speaking, but that speaking is really hard for the kids. And we were doing something recently where I wanted them to record themselves. And they got to the point they were in this small group, there was only 5 kids in the classroom, and they recorded themselves, and it was crickets. And I was like, oh, guys. But because we have that tight-knit group, we were able to talk about why it's hard, why are they nervous, and work around, problem solve some of those issues, because it's their safe space, because they feel comfortable talking across languages. One of my favorite things to see is students build relationships with kids who do not speak the same language as they do. And it's really kind of a gradual, incredible process to see that they become really good friends when they're from opposite ends of the world and speak different languages, but they're both working on a common issue for them of learning taking on this monumental task of learning a new language as a teenager. And it's like I said, it's a difficult task for anyone to do, but to ask a preteen child to do it is a lot in this, could be an awkward time, junior high. So I know what Wes wants to add to that.
Yeah, and I am absolutely going to add to that, especially in the academic sense. My name is Wes Smith. I work at Holmes Junior High. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade newcomer content, so I teach them science and social studies. Last year, I taught all of 7th grade social studies for Holmes Junior High, and any newcomers that were brought into that school would be integrated into the mainstream class. I am EL endorsed, so I was more than happy to take them into my class. I love all of my students learning English. However, that is an extremely tall order for our students who are learning English in a new country and are having a difficult time grappling with this language and making friends, right? So creating this safe space has opened up a lot of opportunities for us to be able to critically drive in on their language proficiency and their acquisition of a brand new language. And it's not to say it's their second language. Some of our students are working on their third, their fourth language. Our students in our newcomer program are extremely smart, but they definitely need this sheltered approach to be able to build that community, build those relationships, and especially drive into that language. When I was teaching them last year and I was teaching the basics of the introduction to the Revolutionary War, while some of my students were working on good morning, may I go to the bathroom, I felt a big dissonance in how I was servicing all of my students. And now I love that I can walk in every day and my 6th graders are singing because that's what 6th graders do. And they come in and they are excited to learn English. And yeah, we aren't going to get to some of those higher tier academic vocabulary words that their mainstream counterparts are. But what we are going to do is going to teach them a lot of tier 1 academic language, tier 2 academic language that can at least get them into the mainstream classes to survive and then make more friends and feel comfortable. So I just wanted to shout out our district for all of the hard work that has gone from last year into this year into creating newcomer sheltered programs at the junior high level. And I love my job now.
Thank you so much. It was a great endorsement.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
This was an incredibly dynamic and productive session. I loved seeing and hearing from so many of you. And I hope that when we do our, the work of the board, our benchmark stuff, that we maybe expand our conversations to kind of touch back on some of these things that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Okay, so we already did comments, so we can move on to 5.01, Superintendent's Monthly Updates. Dr. Bresnahan.
All right. Thank you to our amazing multilingual team. Thank you for being here tonight. So I just want to share some updates across our departments of a lot of the work that has been happening since we last met in December. So NSSEO is conducting their strategic planning. There were initial 2 days that we shared with the board about that. Mr. O'Connor, Dr. Degree, and myself had the opportunity to participate in those 2 days of planning, and there will be 2 additional days coming up at the end of January that I will participate in, as well as other members from the member districts, to really help create a vision and some areas for opportunities for growth for NSSEO and how we best serve students. So that's been an exciting process. We're going to talk a little bit later about our long-range facility planning, and I don't want to lose sight of the work that's going to go around there. So we'll talk about timeline and kickoff for that later in the evening. As we've just talked about, accountability and assessment. So winter benchmark has been completed, and we are deep in the analysis of looking at that data. Very excited to be able to share that data with the board. We continue to grow closer to our goals, while also recognizing that we have shifting changes with our students and shifting needs, and to be able to still continue that growth is pretty remarkable. So that we are planning for in February to have that benchmarking report. Professional learning, we had our Institute Day following winter break, which was a great way to ease back into the new year. So a lot of great sessions, a lot of great feedback. Kudos to Mr. Ludloff and all of the team who really helped organize an amazing day for a lot of staff to participate, not only in our district, but also in collaboration with our area districts and District 214. In business services, we are going to be presenting tonight for approval the enrollment and boundary study to be conducted by a third party, so we can really look at our demographics and our boundaries and enrollments at each of our schools. We are also going to be talking later tonight about our resource allocation, and that has been a partnership across all of our departments as well as with our business office, because obviously with our resource allocation comes budgeting implications. So it's been a great collaboration across all of our departments. We had the initial project meeting for the HVAC project at the ELC, and planning for that to kick off and be underway in the coming summer. So that is exciting. And our Brentwood project, we meet weekly, and many thanks to Dr. Barrett and her team over at Brentwood. It is amazing if you're looking at the weekly pictures and aerial photos that are shared with you. We are on time and on budget. You heard a lot from the multilingual department, but a lot more happening in curriculum and instruction. We have our kindergarten information nights happening very soon. So at the end of this month, we have 3 dates, one at each of our junior highs. Many thanks to Ms. Savage and to Dr. Perdomo, who lead and facilitate those meetings, as well as they partnered with our communications team to develop a video presentation to help support sharing awareness and information around kindergarten registration, what our programs are, what opportunities there are for our families who will be new to our district. Summer school planning is well underway. Dr. Robinson, who I think stepped out, she oversees that as well. So she kicked that off and updated our principals just yesterday, and that will be underway and exciting. We're following some of the same format that we had last summer, and excited for that to get going. And then, as you already heard, a lot about our dual language assessment planning and our newcomer plans and supporting our multilingual learners for next year. In HR, we are continuing to do our certified evaluations. Principals, assistant principals are incredibly busy because they are going to meet that deadline. A lot of staff to evaluate and observe, which is a great partnership and process between our certified staff and our building leaders. But it is very time consuming, but a great process. And our facilitators of teacher mentoring, those are our 2 new positions that we had this year. They are continuing to provide that support to our new teachers and kicking off how we are going to be doing our recruitment efforts for next school year and our anticipated openings. And then, as the board is aware, we have kicked off our collective bargaining with both certified and our ESPs. So thank you to our DEA who's sitting there in the back. Some good partnerships and some busy evenings ahead. And thank you to TR and Nikki, who are the board representatives for that process, as well as to our HR team and other SLT members who are participating in that process. From student services and support, we again are looking collaboratively at our staffing and allocations. So from a student services perspective, we really look at our students based on their needs for those students who have IEPs, as well as looking at our MTSS process and our data, our winter benchmarking data, which helps us identify where we need to shift any interventionists or if there's any, change in needs at the school levels. And then our junior high, as you know, we started using Quaver Ready at the elementary this year. So we are now reviewing that at the junior high level and hoping that Quaver might be something that will align well. So we have a K-8 continuum to support social emotional learning. In technology and innovation, Ben Gray and his team have kicked off our innovation staff advisory team, as he's updated you on. They are going to be participating in presentations from a couple of vendors to really look at our student device options. So that will be happening at the end of this month. Skyward, which is our student information system, as well as our financial management system, is going to be undergoing a major transition in the coming year. And so the teams have been working really diligently to lay out a timeline and do all of the massive prep work it takes to move all of that data over. And so lots of professional learning that will take place, and ensuring that good data is in so that we get good data out. And for the board to know, last piece, board books. We are going to kick that off to transition our agenda planning away from Google Docs and into board books, which will hopefully make Ms. Poland's life much easier, and hopefully will streamline the processes for the board. And Nikki and TR will both be working to get some training on that so that we could get agendas planned and kick that off for the board to start using. And that, I believe, is it.
Any questions? All right, thank you. All right, so next up is the consent agenda. We have items 6.01 through 6.05. Does anybody need anything removed from the consent agenda? If not, can we get a motion to approve?
So moved. Paul, second.
All right, any discussion? Can we have a roll call vote?
Johnson?
Aye.
Kitzinger?
Aye.
Notini?
Aye.
Sager, aye. Chesney?
Abstain.
Zach?
Aye.
Eddie?
All right, motion passes. Moving on, we have the action items. Item 7.01 is the approval of Vision 20, our approval of our support for Vision 2030. Do you want to say anything about this?
Sure. So I had the opportunity to serve on the statewide committee for Vision 2030. I was actually the co-chair for the accountability division of that work. And as you know, we talked briefly before, and Dr. Sager mentioned, assessments is a large part of accountability. Our school report card really advocating from the educator perspective around how do we get better and more useful data? How do we really hold ourselves accountable as school district that reflect the work that we actually do as a system? Vision 2020 really led towards what we now have as our evidence-based funding model. So we are feeling very confident that Vision 2030, I think accountability is going to be one of the strongest areas to come out of that work and really lead to some good improvements and changes that help us really look at public education and the work that we do in its true light, and take into account all the great things school districts do, and not just single test scores, but really the holistic view of the work that we do. It was a great process. There were several subgroups, financial pieces, and really how do we ensure that public education continues to thrive and grow and support high quality educators for the work that we do. So excited to kick it off.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion to approve the resolution for support for Vision 2030?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question about the work on this. Just curiosity. Does that vision of this include things like life skills for kids? So I always keep thinking that we need to be looking at, hey, balancing a checkbook, or financial responsibility, just similar to a checkbook, right? But and things like that. I mean,
It's
I'm curious.
its vision doesn't go into that level of detail, but it does talk about college career and choice ready for students. So I think all of those things are embedded within the philosophy and the outcomes that were derived from the group, for sure.
There's like something in there about specifically not focusing on just getting kids to college, like preparing them
Correct.
for other
It was a
trades
lot about pathways and opportunities and, what focus on whole child. And that ties into the accountability piece too. How do we hold schools accountable for not just, the academics, but how do we look at really how we're helping students become successful for life? And I think that's very aligned with our mission and vision for our district. And so it would be great to see that reflected at the state level and in our school report cards.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Kitzinger,
Aye.
Notini,
Aye.
Sager, aye. Chesney,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Eddie,
Aye.
Johnson.
Okay, the motion passes. Next item, 7.02, the approval of enrollment and boundary study. Somebody want to give a little background?
I'll let Ron.
Darn it. Okay, so the enrollment and boundary study. So what we're trying to do is the district needs one. I mean, to be quite frank, we need one updated. I mean, after COVID-19, other unforeseen world events, things have changed. Our buildings range in different types of utilization, so we need to make sure that we plan it, just so we make sure that we do have something with this ties in tandem with the WOLD study. Excuse me. We found RSP and Associates, who WOLD has worked with, and they actually have worked in the area as well. So the plan is for us to be able to utilize them in tandem with WOLD, for them to get all the data together so we can at least look at it before having any sort of community meetings.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the boundary study?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion, questions?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, and I'll say this ad nauseum. I know that that any firm probably at this point, since it's been so long since a boundary shift has happened, I mean, since it's been 3 decades, I think they're going to come back with quite an aggressive plan. That's my inclination to believe that. But I want to make sure that we all, as we move forward, remember the kids, first of all. It's not their fault that it's been 30 years since we've had a boundary shift. So just keeping in mind transition plans, grandfathering, and et cetera.
Yep. So this is just going to be like another piece of information to go along with the WOLD study, to go along with what we want to do with different programming and the facility. So yeah. How long did they, I mean, obviously it changes day to day, but generally speaking, as we move later into the meeting, how long are these reliable? Or do they have like projections, like high, low, medium? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so I know we talked about this at length when we did the last one with Cropper. I think there was a fairly good amount of reliability up to 5 years. I think they project out 10, but that reliability hits. I think, obviously our newcomer population is one that wasn't necessarily predictable. I don't know if we can predict that moving forward. So I think we're going to have to look at those factors kind of outside of this, but I'm hopeful that they are going to take all of that into consideration as we do this new analysis.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, can I ask what the public facilitation options are?
So the options are, so they typically do 7 facilitations. They would be offering that with the data so that they have discussion amongst the community for like helping to see what the public would say about this. The first option is like they actually fly out here and do it. Second option, and again, it's piecemeal. It's not something like you just have to do. It's virtual, where they would do that for 17.5.
But can you just describe what would the discussion be with the public?
Yeah, Ron, I'll jump in. So we anticipate that they would work in tandem with WOLD. So it's leading the community groups around understanding the data and seeking feedback from community groups in order to move forward to a solution.
Thanks. And the company you're selecting, they're not local? You said fly in, like I
All right,
just,
they're out of Missouri, I believe, or St. Louis area.
did
but
we
they-
look
but
at
they-
local firms at all, just to
No,
know
it's-
this area?
It's very few and far. In fact, RSP does local, such as they've done Palatine, they've done Schaumburg, a lot of our neighbors.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's
I'll still ask the question.
yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
So how did we come around to selecting them? I missed last meeting, so I'm not sure if that was discussed.
We did a lot of homework talking to different firms, specifically architects and districts, to determine who was out there. There were probably four major players. One of them was in and out of China, so we couldn't really get him. That was a really tough one. There was a second one out of California that didn't do anything local, and it was more for big districts. And then RSP here, they were more of kind of up our alley in terms of what we were looking for. The one thing is with these types of firms, they're not out there. It's really tough to find somebody who has accreditation, that has a team that puts in the data. So it was kind of difficult to find like even additional firms, but we wanted to make sure it was something too that if we were going to bring in and vet, that it was going to be able to do something that our district would have a lot of confidence behind those numbers.
Makes sense. Thank you. And Michelle, I see here, Orland Park, Kansas.
Yeah, that's where they're from, Overland Park?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? If not, we do a roll call vote.
Notini,
Aye.
Sager, aye. Chesney,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Eddie,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kitzinger.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. 7.03 is the approval of Operation Warm donation to School District 59. Somebody like to read that?
Sure.
The whole thing, the background? I'm sorry. I've never done it, so.
No, just
be it resolved.
be it resolved.
Okay.
Go for it.
Be it resolved that on the 15th day of January 2025, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approves the donation from Operation Warm Inc. to CCSD59. This donation of new winter coats has an estimated value of $10,200. Keep going. Be it further resolved that the superintendent shall communicate to Operation Warm Inc. in writing, expressing the appreciation of the members of the Board of Education, and that this donation shall be listed in the official minutes of this meeting.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Any comments, questions? Can we do a roll call vote?
Sager, aye. Chesney,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Eddie,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kitzinger,
Aye.
Notini.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. And then lastly, 7.04, authorization to bargain with the educational support personnel, the ESP. So they have one more year left on their contract, but to align the contracts with the certified staff, we just need to go through this procedural motion. So can I get a motion to authorize us to bargain with the ESP staff?
Sure. Be it resolved that on the 15th date of January 2025, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education authorizes bargaining with the ESP collective bargaining unit for the purpose of negotiating as the current collective bargaining agreement and successor years.
I'll second.
Move to second. Any questions, discussion? If not, can we have a roll call vote?
Chesney,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Eddie,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kitzinger,
Aye.
Notini,
Aye.
Sager, aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to discussion items, we have 8.01, the resource allocation process overview.
Yes, good evening. First of all, what a celebration to see such a great example of District 59 staff here tonight. That is District 59. Whether you're in a pre-K building, third grade classroom, junior high, the instruction department, business services, that's District 59. So it was just great to see. I'm also aware that it's 9:05. Some of us are on our 5th hour, so I will take whatever lead you prefer. I'll go through things that I know you're aware of. I'll slow down where I think some things might be new, but please stop me if you have questions or tell me to get going if you know what I'm talking about.
And I'll
Okay?
just, thanks, Ross. I'll just add that on the 29th, our committee of the whole meeting will be like diving deeper into this topic. So.
Okay, so I'll present more like a preview because yes, you'll see this is the annual time of year where we come together and give information about our resource plan. There are a number of phases. These are really some summaries. This is closely more phase 6 where we're presenting to you. And the presentation earlier tonight, there were so many little highlights within it where you heard Dr. Perdomo say that's when the department's connecting and we're connecting with principals and departments are talking about what are the needs now? What are the needs that we're seeing moving forward? Those are continuing. But the board will be asked to vote, not at the next meeting, the committee of the whole, but at the February meeting on any resource recommendations. But sometimes this can be a little bit confusing. So I thought I'd put some clarifiers on there. This is what is not part of resource allocation. Sometimes people think this is the one time a year we can give the district the okay to hire people. And that is not the case. As you know, we approve the consent agenda that has HR recommendations on it every month. So if we have a large group of students move into our district, maybe they're newcomer students, we can mid-year add positions. When we have classes that roll up or classes that get larger than we would like them to be, when we have special education needs, a student moves in, they have an IEP, we add those staff throughout the year. And you see that as a board and act on that through the consent agenda. What allocation really aligns with is when we're having big strategic initiatives, when we are adding new programs or expanding programs. For the example I picked was instructional coaching. We did not always have instructional coaching. And we started with 2 smaller teams. We added a coach to each team. And then as our needs changed, we changed our allocation. Those are more in the scope of the types of changes we're going to talk about. But also something that we should always be considering are just the different pieces that go along with any big decision. Is it a data-driven decision? Is it going to have a financial impact? Staffing does. And it's not just the base salary. There are reoccurring costs, and base salaries, as you know, they are every year we're paying that, and typically with compensation raises within the CBA. But then there's insurance costs, there's supply costs, there's computer costs. There are all of those pieces. And then do we have the facility capacity? Do we have space? We have parking spaces and storage. That was a new challenge this year that I had not seen before in 59. We literally have more staff than parking spots. So we are building parking spots for our resource-rich team. So just some things to consider because we wouldn't decide something like this in isolation. Here are some review ones, so I'll go quicker, but stop me if you have questions. For many, many years, it was every building gets this amount of staff. And we have switched that philosophy. And again, you heard Dr. Perdomo speak of it with the ESL resource teachers. Now it's what staff do we need for our students? And it might sound like a simple change, but it's actually pretty significant. Here's a good example. Interventionists or ESL resource. The old model would have been every building in District 59 gets 2 staff. That's fair. Everyone gets 2. But the sizes of our schools and the needs are different. So now our plan is like this for our resource interventionists. Brentwood, at the time of this screenshot, had 368 students, 3.5 interventionists because of what the data said the students needed there. Bird, in this screenshot, 292 students, a smaller school than Brentwood, but they have 4 interventionists because that's what the data called to do. So while all of our buildings and the staff within those buildings call those places home, their work home, resource teachers, ESL resource, interventionist coaches, they really are district-wide in the sense that we are shifting and moving where the needs are, whether that's data or enrollment. So that is our approach. Things to consider. Like a curriculum adoption plan, we didn't buy a new lit program and then next year we were good to go. We bought it knowing it was going to be a multi-year rollout. We have to buy it. We have to get the materials. We have to train staff, give them time to get used to it, all of that good stuff. It takes a few years. We have actually been hiring quite aggressively in District 59 because we're so fortunate to have board support and resources to do so. So we have actually added about 145 positions in the last 10 years, additional positions. That's like 3 of our smallest elementary schools. That's incredible. 23, 24 alone, we added 25 interventionists. The ESL resource teachers Dr. Perdomo was speaking of, that was in that allotment. Junior high elective teachers and more. That was just that year. And we actually still have some open positions from that wish list of allocations from last year that we are still filling now. Neighboring school district comparisons are always just a healthy practice. How are we comparing to others? What are those ratios looking like? And then we just approved, the board just approved Vision 2030. What is their focus in terms of staffing moving forward? And then also, what's going to be the learning that comes from the WOLD long-range planning, the enrollment and boundary study, the program task force that Dr. Robinson mentioned. So I cannot wait to see what those tell us in kind of a multi-tiered approach of, okay, now what staffing do we need to support that? So here's a quick snapshot of additional allocations that the board has approved since 2015-16. So you can see 2021-22, we added 10 additional positions, then 27, then 25. Last year, it's the first time I've had a column like this. It was a little different. The board approved 18 positions, but you may also recall that we got approval for an MOU so that 12-month paraprofessionals at the Ad Center could become non-negotiated, so we would have one team. Part of that MOU was we're not taking 14 positions out of the union. If a staff member chooses to go 12-month to non-negotiated, we would then post a paraprofessional position and put it at the school. And every single one of our 12-month ESPs chose to be non-negotiated. So that's over 30 FTE that we have that we can then, again, just like it was such a great kickoff, the earlier presentation, what are the needs? Are they ESL right now? Are they interventionists?
And are those all teaching positions or a mix of teaching admin?
It's a great question. It's a mix of certified and ESP in that allotment. The 14 for sure are ESP. Of the 18, there was a little of both. So here are some of the comparisons with our neighboring districts. So we're a medium to large district compared to our neighbors. We have 15 schools. You can see where the others fall. That does impact staffing because of efficiency and just ability to provide teams and to be able to have individuals district-wide or at certain schools. In terms of students per school, you can see we do a really nice job. There's only one district that has fewer students on average per school. So we have about 409 students at each of our schools. District 23 has 4 schools too. It's a smaller district. Students to administrators. There's an administrator for every 118 students. Students to certified staff, 8.8. So we are doing well when we look at our rivals. Paraprofessionals, we're doing very well. For every 23 and a half students, there is a paraprofessional hired in District 59. And to be clear, this is just comparing numbers of positions. Needs at different schools and communities are different, but this is a good thing to look at when we're looking at the big picture. Total staff. Someone said, so you're saying if we did an all school field trip or all district field trip, all of us are going to Brookfield Zoo, the whole district, which would be wild. And we used every single employee, and I didn't put the board in that number, but I should have put the board in that number.
We'd be chaperones.
You'd be chaperones, and you would have a group of 5 to 6 students. That's pretty, I mean, that's incredible. That is something to celebrate from our current board members, our previous board members, our community. That's incredible. And then Vision 2030, the 2 things that really stuck out to me that they recommended from a staffing perspective was keeping students in schools safe and attracting and retaining high quality educators, which really aligns to conversations we've been having. So that just stood out to me very, very quickly. I've shown this before. I don't know if some of our newer board members saw this when I shared it. At first, it's a little bit confusing. This is a snapshot of every elementary classroom, our monolingual and our bilingual classrooms. It is not including our special ed programming. These are our classrooms. So this year we have 204 sections or classes. Next year we'll have 202. Right out of the gate, those are 2 positions that we can do something with, 2 FTEs. So we might say, okay, maybe we convert those into coaching roles when we post it. That'd be great. And I don't have to ask the board for 2 more additional allocations. The lighter color represents monolingual classrooms. The blue color represents bilingual classrooms. It's kind of hard to see, but there are a couple that are gray, like John Jay first grade. John Jay first grade has 1 monolingual class, 2 bilingual classes, and this year they will have 1 less class in first grade. So that means this year they had 3 bilingual classes. And what you'll see in some other slides is just the impact that that has on our district. Now, Forest View is a really clean example of a 3-round school. They have 3 sections per grade. So that means every teacher at a grade level has 2 partners. We heard Viesha Pluskva speak to the value of having a partner. It also means that compared to the example I shared about John Jay, a teacher isn't going to have to move to another grade level solely because there's 1 less class there this year. At John Jay first grade, we're going to have to move a teacher to where that class is needed. The more consistent we can be, the more the professional development that we're getting can stick in, the more that we can get used to, again, that presentation. We heard them saying, we're starting to get, our feet on the ground. We're starting to understand the grade level curriculum. That's a huge factor. Now we have 4 total elementary schools where every teacher at a grade level has a partner within their program. So Ridge has 2 teachers per grade level. They have a partner. And Claremont is another good example. They have 2 teachers per grade level for their program, but also 4 teachers at the grade level, because there are so many instructional strategies and pieces that are not dependent on the program. It's just good teaching and knowing our kids. So we have some singletons too. A singleton means it's the only class at that grade for that program. So I lit those up in red. Some schools have more than others. Some of them kind of rotate out. You'll see Brentwood is an example of that bilingual class and program is moving out. We're gradually removing that out of that school. That's why this year we have 3, 4, 5, and that's why you see that gray box there in 3rd grade next year, because we won't have it. And all of these teachers are without an actual teammate within their program. Now, Rupli, you see everyone has at least another partner, maybe not in their program. There are actually more singletons for monolingual next year than dual language, almost double, which is something that just stands out to me. This might seem a little overwhelming. I apologize. If it's too much, you can just look away. This represents class size. So, and again, this is the data that was pulled mid-December. It's already changed a little bit with students coming in and out. But I lit up every class that has 13 or less or 24 or more. Now, the certified CBA says that if it's grade K1, 2, we really want to try to make sure those class sizes are as small as possible. But I just lit them all up just to give us some perspective. Today, our class range is 28 in our highest class, and I think 10 in our lowest class, with a range of 18, and I think an average of 18, which is interesting that the average and the range is the same. So you can also see here, these are some of the things that even in those other charts where we have a healthy amount of staff, in some of our schools, we're having some efficiency and consistency issues. Hence why the board is going to be looking at some of those other studies from the boundaries and facilities we're seeing it all come together. So here is the allocation recommendation. But first, one last reminder that it is all of these different things. Is it a solution that's based on data, or is it a Band-Aid? Sometimes you need to hire a Band-Aid. But which is it? So we know and can support it and be transparent with our hires so we know. Are we hiring 30 interventionists temporarily over a 3-year plan to get everything reset? Or are we building a new school and we need additional staff? Is it a solution or a Band-Aid? Fiscal responsibility. Yes, we are very blessed with resources, but it also costs quite a bit to run this place each day. And every commitment has a long-term impact. A certified teacher can receive tenure after 3 years. So in year 4, we can't say, you know what, I don't think we need all of those whatevers anymore. We would have to find them a position. So we have to just think in those 3 to 5 year type cycles. What's the applicant market? I think of this one like the housing market. If I'm ready to buy a house today, what's available to me? The houses that are currently up for sale. The gorgeous one across the street from me, they're never leaving. So what does the market look like? So before we have these huge plans, what does the market look like? And then the support capacity. We're still super lucky in District 59. We are getting as many applicants a week as we were before the pandemic. We have not lowered our hiring standards at all. We turn away candidates, even if we have an opening, if they do not meet our standard. Nothing is going to bring urgency to us to put someone or a warm body in front of our students. But when we do hire, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. Do we have the support to make sure that our teachers, whether they're experienced, which we hire experienced teachers, if there is a teacher that has 15 years experience in Schaumburg, we can hire them and give them 15 years credit because of our resources. That person will still need additional support when they come on board. So if all of those stars align, then we should be saying, okay, board, here's what we need. And it shouldn't be a surprise to you because of all of the other data. So for the admin, we are not recommending any changes. We're good to go. For certified staff, I continue to share the 2 names of our new teacher mentors. It's really one position that we added last year to try this out that's shared by 2 people. They're actually half-time that position and half-time coaches. So what we have learned, we have like 30% of our certified staff are pre-tenured. We hired, I think, 75 or so certified staff just this year. Over 200 hires total last year. So what we have really learned in just this first half of the year is, boy, is that valuable to have a dedicated person who can stop by your classroom, who can do our orientation, who can connect with mentors, and all of that good stuff. But that's only been focused on our certified staff. Our paraprofessionals and ESP staff have given us really wonderful, clear feedback that they need that support too. And so we would like to expand that from 1 position to 2 position. We have the 2 people that would give an FTE then, that with their coaching spot would open up, and that also enhances then the coaching team. Now you'll see, I said, this isn't going to cost us anything, because you remember I said we have a couple FTE from our sections changing. So I think we can do this, but in full transparency, this is the idea today. We will continue to reevaluate what happens over the next few months. If something happens even this summer, we have the HR consent agenda to do what we need to do. But right now, from all the conversations with leaders and our partnerships, this is something we think makes a lot of sense. And then on top of that, also we have 19, there was some talk about coaches. There's 19, 1 additional to 20 would be great. And again, I think we can do that cost neutral within our allocation. No changes for custodial. We added some a few years ago. That's going well. ESPs, we still have some positions and FTEs to fill, as I mentioned, like through the MOU. So when I say we're good to go, I don't mean we're fully staffed there. I mean, we still have room to go ahead and do what we need to do. Non-negotiated, this one's a little interesting because I don't know if it should technically fall on resource allocation. As I said, that's more like programming, but I thought it was good to put here. because it is programming in a sense, but it's one individual. So we have for the first time, we are sharing a director of safety and security, and we believe it's time to go full time. So I put cost to be determined because it's an individual compensation piece that we would process with the board through the consent agenda. But this is also something that is on our radar. So when we approve to move forward, we would act on this, bring recommendations to the board and so on. But I wanted to put it here. And then no other types of staff. In summary, really that's the only one that would have some different costs to it. But we will continue to monitor over the next coming months and the summer as well. Did we do it? We did it. So any immediate questions for clarification so that you can think about things for when we come back in a couple weeks?
So you said there are allocated FTEs that are unfilled right now. Can you give a rough number and what categories those are?
I can't. Right now we have 33 technically. Some, like in the certified category, there are 10 certified. We've hired from the beginning of the year from an agency, 5 staff, so they are with us the whole year. They're not open and vacant, but that's an FTE that's sitting there. We've also used some internal coverage. On the consent agenda that you approved this evening, we had a couple December graduates that were also within our system, which is great. Again, that mentor position, they're doing really great things with recruiting and student teaching and our assistants. We have, and then we have one non-negotiated that we hope to fill this week in the HR team. And then we have a number of the ESP positions that I mentioned. When you look at what we currently have posted, that isn't always a one-to-one correlation. Sometimes, for example, when we wanted to add 10 ESL resource teachers, sometimes we might post that as one position and then have a team go from one pool. Sometimes we will post things individually. So if you ever do go there, it is a snapshot, but sometimes it could be a little bit more than that because we will pull multiple candidates out of one single posting.
So I have one clarifying question.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not see ESPs on there. Would they be, or?
No, because we already have the FTEs to continue to fill those spots.
I thought that we're way down on ESPs at the moment.
No, we're not. As a matter of fact, well, I think it depends on how we define that. When we added 14 additional positions on this July, you could look at it and say, oh, we're down. We have 14 openings. There were also new openings. We, for example, added 5.5 LBS this year just because of new IEP needs, and we filled them. There was an LBS on the consent agenda tonight. We also added 9 additional special education teaching assistants just because of new IEP needs. That's on top of everything else. So to answer your question is, yes, we still have openings and we are actively filling them. And then most of those are new allocations, but then if we have to fill 9 special education, then we're putting our focus there. So we do not need an additional.
So you're saying the allocation is there, but they may not be filled at this moment.
We are still actively filling them.
Okay, because I asked for that allocation sheet like a few months ago, and it showed,
yes,
whatever, 39, 30, whatever.
It's important to know like that chart I showed you of how many are additional new positions. That's reflected in there.
Okay.
So I was sharing with some principals. My son went out on Friday night. He said, I'm going to go to Portillo's with the guys. My wife said, you need money. He said, no, it's okay. And she said, take $20. And then on Saturday night, he said, hey, do you guys mind if I go out again? No, that's awesome. And my wife said, do you need more money? And he said, no, I have money left over from last night. And I said, why didn't you give the money back from last night? But that's a different discussion. So it's like that. He's still good to go. But if he does need money, text us, let us know what's going on. And that's my job to report to the board. So we still have a healthy amount of ESP positions to fill and allocate out.
Okay, but the allocation is there. We don't have to ask for above. We just need to fill those spots.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay, and the other comments I have, it's not clarification or anything, but just my hope for what we'll discuss at the committee of the whole where we discuss this further. I mean, we really haven't discussed this as a board at all, but
Mhm.
I'm just hoping that, your list of strategic initiatives drive resource allocation. I'm hoping, I mean, I know something I'd like to talk about is providing more support for our students behind grade level, if beyond MTSS parameters. I don't know if that means more staff or that means existing staff work before and after school, summer school. I mean, those are the types of things that I'm hoping we can talk about before this plan is finalized. Also, psychologists, social workers. I think I've asked the question before that sometimes we contract out that work, or nurses. Do we need to add more positions there? Or I'm just not sure, why
Sure.
those vacancies are there. I don't know if it means that the allocation isn't there, or,
Right. I can speak to a couple of those things.
Okay.
One is, well, first, thanks for sharing that. Something like summer school wouldn't be an allocation. That's usually our internal staff that does that. There's a stipend for that that's bargained through the negotiation process. When we can't fill enough spots, yes, we will post to fill those spots, but that is just a little bit different.
but if we change just the scope of summer school,
Mhm.
wouldn't that drive an allocation?
No, because we're not adding additional allocation. The board's just approving funding through the contract for how much we would pay our own staff to work outside of their contract year to do summer school. So the only clarification is it wouldn't fall within resource allocation. If you wanted 50 summer school teachers next year, we wouldn't have to add that here. The
Oh,
board-
okay.
That's
That's a different conversation?
yes,
Okay.
because they're our own staff. We're just really paying them like an extra duty, like if they were coaching or if they were doing a supervisory duty, because they're our own staff. Now, you spoke about psychs and social workers. I believe we only have one social worker opening that we did contract through an agency. And that is one nice thing about some of those specialized special education positions, is that there are a lot of agencies that can help us with that, not so much with a classroom teacher. Within those two groups, other than the one that we have an agency person and we are fully staffed, the Illinois report card is starting to track those ratios now, so there's no comparative data. But in 2024, it was interesting to see where we stacked up. For psychologists, the state ratio is 1 for every 885 students. We're 1 for every 378 students. For social workers, it's 1 to 430, and we're like 1 to 298.
I guess it's just, is it meeting our needs? I think is the
Exactly.
most important thing, not
Ex-
necessarily the comparisons.
Exactly. Well, and I do think the comparisons are important because, first of all, if the comparison was the other way around, that is an important data point too. Then the other piece is, okay, well, what are the IEP minute requirements? What are the student needs exactly? So yeah, in terms of some of those numbers, that's, I don't know, if you think of specific information you need, please reach out to me. And then, yeah, we'll see what the board's discussion is at the committee of the whole as it connects to our other programming.
Thanks.
Anything else I can help with?
Good. Thanks, Ross.
All right, thank you.
Okay, 8.02
Ross,
is-
by the way, great presentation. Thank you.
Oh,
8.02 is the policy updates for Press 117. Anything major?
No, you've all been, I believe, given a copy in the recommendations. And so this will be first reading, and then next month we will be looking for approval.
Any questions? Okay, then we can move on to 8.03, excuse me, the long-range facility planning.
Sure. So last month, the board approved the contract with Wool to conduct the long-range facility planning based on our given initiatives and priorities. I would like to recommend to the board that we conduct a kickoff for that in August. I think we were looking at a very aggressive timeline originally, but given negotiations, given other things that are kind of on our plate, I want to make sure that it's given the full attention. I think it will also be really timely to have the boundary study data available when the facilitation of the committee begins. And so for that, our team would really like to recommend that we build up communication around the process, what that looks like, garner support and representatives from the community and from our staff, and partner with Wold to kick that off in August, September. And I've spoken to Wold, and there's no issues on their end. Everything would just remain the same with their contract. I think it'd be a more streamlined process and timeline, and not have the summer gap in the middle of the process, which would also be good.
I think a lot of the concern is people who are involved with other things that need to happen because they need to happen, like such as union negotiations and such, would be also tapped to do this, and it would just be too much to do everything well. And then also, yeah, it'll line up with when we get the boundary study. It will line up hopefully with more data behind like the dual language programming and benchmarking and all that kind of stuff. And then also it would probably line up with when we start working on the next strategic plan in the last year.
Correct. I think it's going to give a good foundation to then shift that right into strategic planning, which will be right at the prime time for that to kick off and begin.
I'm okay with it as long as, I mean, we talked about Band-Aids earlier. You know, some of the solutions from this would go to solving some of the things that take Band-Aids right now. So as long as district leadership thinks the Band-Aids will be good enough to get us to that point, that's fine with me. I don't know, Joe?
Yeah, as I said last time, my big concern was teacher availability over the summer. We'll burn out our teachers if we're trying to run too much through them at once, I think.
Good. Anybody?
I have just one question. It's been brought to my attention at Frost, Frost is continuing to take the dual language students from Devonshire. Is that going to become unsustainable next school year? Are there decisions that need to be made now about that?
I don't think will be unsustainable for next year, but I do think that it is a pressure point that we have seen coming since the decision to shift students from Brentwood as well as Devonshire. Devonshire, now that we made the boundary change from Brentwood over to Devonshire, is seeing an influx of a whole new group of students as well. Brentwood's enrollment is actually leveling off really nicely. Part of the other issue with Frost, and this is going to be representative of what needs to be discussed and a long-term solution, not a Band-Aid, needs to be fought for, is its class size is also a big issue. So you run out of rooms when you have classes of 12 to 14 really, really fast. And so we have our mobiles over there, which is, the Band-Aid, but long-term around the boundary piece and where students are coming from and how programming is positioned within the schools, that needs to be a long-term strategic decision made by the board. Or it'll go from Frost to Claremont to John Jay. Every school is going to get hit at some point.
Right, understood. But your answer is you believe one more year is sustainable at Frost, given the current trajectory?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other feedback? Okay, good. All right, reports of the Board of Education. We will start with Nikki. Are you still there? Shall sleep. Blame her.
I am. No, I didn't fall asleep.
All right, you can go first if you have one.
Just that we started negotiations, and I'm really looking forward to a collaborative process. I was pleasantly surprised at just how open everybody was at the meeting, so I look forward to really collaborating with everybody.
Great, thank you. Joe?
So yesterday, Ed Red had a real nice meeting with Andrew Bowes. Is that how you say his name? On tier 2 pensions. His name was not how it was spelled. It was not how it was pronounced. But it went into the issues with why tier 2 pensions are becoming a problem. Essentially, the TRS system is a replacement for Social Security, and so it has to have certain levels of benefits that it must meet to qualify as a replacement plan. And based on the system that was set up 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago at this point, the Tier 2 system is in danger of not staying qualifying, and so we'll need some adjustments somewhere. So it's an issue that's going forward in Springfield this year and needs to be dealt with to some degree fairly quickly.
Nothing new necessarily. I just want to plug one more time a program I'm through the district that is really excellent that I'm taking my daughter to, who's 2, is Play and Learn, which is at Ridge and the ELC, at Ridge on Tuesdays and the ELC on Mondays. And it's fantastic, especially for people who have preschool age kids who are not currently enrolled in a preschool or who are not old enough to be enrolled in preschool yet. But it's amazing, and I highly recommend it. So.
I only have one thing to report, which is sort of related to 59. I mentioned it before, I did, but this time I actually did take part in the community program, Mount Prospect Neighbors Help for the Holidays, which helps provide holiday gifts for families, most of which were from District 59. Our community outreach staff connected us with the families. So I just wanted to say I took part in that, as well as several District 59 parents and staff took part. And also just a shout out to my friend Karen Davidson, who leads up that program. She was just named a Shining Star by the Village of Mount Prospect. That's an annual designation given to 6 outstanding volunteers in the community. So, and again, it started in 59. It's always been about District 59. So shout out to Karen. Thank you.
I attended the fall play at Friendship, which was Game of Tiaras. Hilarious. It was so good. Game of Thrones meets Disney princesses. It was very funny drama. It was wonderful. The audience was laughing the whole time. My kids loved it. It was so fun. Shout out to the PTO over there, the staff and students for welcoming me to Friendship. I sat with the PTO president over there because her family couldn't make it. It snowed that day. I don't remember what day it was. I didn't write it down. But it was very snowy, and her family didn't come. So she let us sit right by her. It was wonderful. And then I took my kids sledding over the weekend because, again, snow, here we are. And I saw so many kids from District 59 at Bird, just so many. There were a ton of kids on that hill. It was phenomenal. So I hope a bunch of kids got to go sledding over the weekend, and hope everybody had a great holiday and New Year. And we're glad to be back. Thank you.
Well, all I have to say is snowing during that play, it's perfect, team.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was. It was.
So first, I would like to take this opportunity to wish everyone here on the board, our teachers, our staff, parents, students, and the community, very happy New Year. And my biggest update, last week during the NSSEO meeting, as Dr. Brasnahan mentioned, there was the strategic meetings for the strategic plan 2025-2030. And I think the biggest takeaways that I just wanted to highlight that were presented to the board were the adjustments to the priorities or creation of the priorities for the next 5 years. And those priorities, oh my gosh, my computer is not cooperating with me. Sorry about that. The key ones the ones just highlighting those things, instruction and planning, just to make sure that NSSEO focus on designing and utilizing continuous improvement process for the instructions and the PD. Also, the creating of the long-term facilities and finance plan. It's a continuation that happened for the past couple of years, which Joe was so great at helping start. And we all know is very much needed for NSSEO. A brand new priority is the governance. Implementation of defined advisory plus governance structure that ensures collaborative collaborative decision-making and engagement of all member districts, superintendents, and NSSEO, which will help a lot more with the collaboration and communication, and would also help superintendents guide the board members participating in NSSEO with the decision-making and just governing, right? And last and not least, priority is to gaining and keeping the high quality, retaining, high quality staff. So just wanted to highlight those because those are very important and wanted to make sure it's out there.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that is it. No closed session. All right. So I just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right.